Who's making noise? Thank you all. It's 6 o'clock. We have a joint meeting with the Select Board, Finance Committee, and Affordable Housing Trust this evening. I think we're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do you guys need to open your meeting?
Yes, we do. I declare the select board meeting open. We have quorum and we're ready to go.
Finance Committee? Affordable Housing, do we have enough?
There's 4.
You do have a quorum.
Yeah, we have a quorum, okay.
Yeah.
Make a motion that we open the Affordable Housing Trust as well. Second.
Our microphones on.
Aye.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, thank you. So, 6 o'clock, we have a joint meeting with, I think first time in a long time, with Select Board, Planning Board, Finance Committee, and we have the consultants for our MBT Community Planning Project. So we're going to start off with a presentation from them. Do you want to introduce who they are, Maren?
Okay, those two that I remember, Emily Innes from Innes Associates and Eric Halverson of RKG. You might recall Eric worked with us for the master plan process. And Chris, whose last name I'm going to forget, I apologize.
Is this working? Yes? Okay, excellent. So my name is Emily Ennis, as Maren said. I'm here with my colleagues Eric Halverson and Chris Herlick, and I'm going to use this rather than pointing this way because we've got a lot of different boards to talk to. So Maren, if you can advance the slide, please. So I'll start off with, we'd actually like all of you who are here from the boards to introduce yourselves. So that way we can start getting names and faces, and you can all sort of know each other. I understand from Maren that a couple of you are new, so we'll do that in a moment. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and what the MBTA Communities is and the goals that Littleton needs to reach. And then we're really going to go into the meat of today's discussion, really. We want this to be a conversation with all of you. We are, as you'll see when we get to the timeline, at the very beginning of this process. And so it's important for us to hear from you at this point so we know how to shape it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the process. Maren, do you want to move forward? So I thought we'll do introductions, and if you don't mind, I just sort of put them in order up there. So Select Board, if you want to start, then we'll go to the Planning Board, Finance Committee, and Affordable Housing. That lets us do sort of a circle around the room. So,
Matthew Nordhaus, I'm the chair of the select board.
Frank Coast, clerk, select board. Gary Wilson, vice chair of the select board.
Cindy Natalie, member select board.
Mark Reinbacher, member of select board.
Anna Houston, planning board.
Bartlett Harvey, Planning Board.
Mark Montanaro, Chairman of the Planning Board.
Delisa Laterzo, planning board.
Maren Toohill, town planner. Thank you.
always good.
Tyler Gray, Chair of FinCom.
Alvin Rasmus, member of FinCom.
Brad Harlox, member of FinCom.
Fred Faulkner, member of FinCom.
Jolene Josie, member of FinCom. Susan Melander, Affordable Housing Trust.
Angus Michaels, Affordable Housing Trust.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome all. So delighted to have such a large group. I'll introduce myself really quickly just to let you know. I am an urban planner and urban designer. I do a lot of zoning work, which is one of the reasons that I'm here. And Eric and Chris and I partner on a lot of projects. Eric, if you want to tell them a little bit about RKG.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to be back and see some familiar faces from a couple years ago. Eric Halverson, a principal with RKG Associates. We do a lot of market analytics, economic development, fiscal and economic impact modeling all around New England and the country. Chris and I are going to be working with Emily, because Emily and I have been working a lot on MBTA communities work for the last couple months. And Chris is also an urban designer by trade, so he'll be helping us with some test fits and three-dimensional modeling as part of the project. So excited to be back.
Thank you, Eric. One of the things that we focus on when we collaborate on zoning is making sure that zoning works. So some of the financial aspects of it, some of the physical aspects of it. Eric mentioned test fits. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the public engagement. So this is the timeline, and as you can see, task 1, project initiation, very early in that task is this policy workshop. And it was important to us because we know that this community has done some zoning in relatively recent years, some of which has worked and has passed town meeting, some of which has not. And so it's important for us to understand how that process has worked early in the process, some of the policy decisions that you're likely to face as a community is what we'll be talking about. And then just get a sense of the type of public engagement that's useful, the type of information people want to have at those meetings, what would be helpful for those, and then also for your approval process. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Then Eric and I and Chris are going to put together a public outreach plan with Mara that talks about our steps with the public. You can see broadly that we're looking at doing some initial analysis of current zoning relative to MBTA, and that will be done by early January. We'll then be looking at fit studies for areas that we want to look at in terms of potential zoning changes, and that's going to inform a public process throughout April and June. So there's going to be plenty of points during this at which we will be talking with people about what they think, what their concerns are, what their hopes are for zoning. We'll be looking at doing draft zoning by 7:15, so that's 5 meetings with board and select board to talk about the draft zoning. Obviously, welcoming back the Finance Committee and Affordable Trust Committee if they'd like to be there, and then looking at approval is the current timeline that we have, looking at sort of a September Planning Board and Select Board meeting to approve the final draft zoning that would then be going to town meeting. So the MBTA communities is Section 3A of the Zoning Act. It is a recent addition to the Zoning Act. For those of you who don't work with zoning on a regular basis, zoning is what controls the development of a town, both in terms of land uses and in terms of physical forms. So where the buildings are, what they look like if you have design guidelines, more specifically, but what their massing, their height, how far they're set back from the street. All of these that have real implications for how we move through space during our day-to-day lives is controlled by zoning. So 3A is a new law that requires that MBTA communities, which include those like Littleton with commuter rail, allow multifamily housing as of right. So in other words, not through a special permit process. There are some communities that already allow that and some that don't. A site plan approval process would be allowed, but not the special permit. But it goes beyond that. So the legislative requirements include information about the size of the district. It must be of reasonable size. It must have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, and there are some limitations around how that's calculated. Has to be located not more than 0.5, so half mile, from a commuter rail station or other transit station that's identified in there. And the regulations, the multifamily can't be restricted by age, and it must be suitable for families with children, or at least have some units that are suitable for families with children. That's the gist of the law. Now, where that comes on the next slide, which is DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, has been working on a series of guidelines about how that law is interpreted. And this very messy slide is not something I expect you to read today, but obviously the presentation will be available afterwards. But I want to call out the 3 different parts that you should be concerned with. One is these requirements here, starting with the community category. This is what Littleton needs to meet. So you're a commuter rail category, a community category is commuter rail. The 2020 housing units is your basis for some of the calculations in there. So that's from the census. And all of this information comes from DHCD's website on MBTA, multifamily housing. The minimum multifamily unit capacity, that is the minimum that you have to meet. And in fact, 750 is the minimum. No community will have a minimum below 750. You have a minimum land area of 50 acres. And so when we look at the district or districts that Littleton needs to have, it's going to be a minimum of 50 acres. Your developable station area, which is the area around the station that can be developed, is 244 acres. So you see 50 is a smaller percentage of the amount around your station. And the percent of your district that needs to be located in the station area is 20%. And what that means is of your minimum 50 acres, and you can go above that if you want to or if you need to, depending on how you do that, 20% of whatever your district is has to be in the station area. We'll talk about why that's important in a minute. The other things you should see, so you see the numbers here are tied to different things. This is from the definition section of the guidelines. So it tells you what 1, 2, and 4 mean. 3, 2 again, and 5 are from the guidelines in terms of how these are calculated. Now, we won't go through this today because we want to get through the policy section, but this is something that during the process we will be talking about. And then 5, percentage of district within station area, this is how it's calculated, but these 3 items underneath are definitions again. So you will start to become familiar with this idea of developable land, excluded land, and other definitions, multifamily unit capacity. All of these are terms that you're going to be hearing throughout the process. So today we just want to let you know where your requirements are and what to start to be looking for, but we'll be going through this in a lot more detail. Next slide. So kicking off the process, we're looking at 2 areas that could be districts underneath the MBTA communities. One is King Street, for which you have approved zoning. The other is the area around Littleton Station. So this ellipse, is the parcels within the half-mile or so of the radius. And again, this is important because 20% of your district has to be within the station area, or a minimum of 20% of the district. So next slide, please. So while King Street Common, which has been approved, can contribute to the 750 units that you need, the 40R will be the basis, whether it stays as it is, whether it gets changed. It's at least going to be a start because we know you've at least already talked about that. This process is going to help us determine whether that stays, goes, morphs into something else. That's all to come. Now, an important component of this is that the Act is not about physically producing the units. It's about zoning to produce. It's about zoning for the units, right? So we're not talking about a plan right now that says X number of units are going to be built in exactly these spaces. We're talking about setting up the regulations that would allow that number of units to be built. And so that's going to be really important throughout the process. A lot of people, when you start planning processes, assume that there's going to be a specific project at the end of it. This is a zoning process. There will be zoning at the end of it. Anybody who wants to create a project under said zoning still has to go through, has to wait for town meeting to speak on it, and then has to go through whatever process is set up. So I just want to make it very clear, these numbers are not, these number of units must be produced by the town. They are about, the town has to establish zoning that could allow those numbers of units to be produced. So as we look at what's already been approved for King Street Common and what was started for Littleton Station and that we'll be evaluating throughout this, we've got a couple of questions to ask ourselves. So first of all, do these zoning regulations meet the requirements of the MBTA communities? And if not, what needs to be adjusted? And so that can be dimensional standards. It can be the geography of the district, which can either be expanded or contracted. It could be other requirements in the zoning. And again, we'll talk about this throughout the process. And then finally, this isn't just a numbers game about what, let's create zoning that meets these numbers and we're done. This is also, these are new zoning requirements that may be able to help fulfill the goals of the community. So part of the planning process is going to be, a huge part of the planning process is going to be, what does the town of Littleton want for the station area? What changes might it want to make to King Street? And how does the zoning help fulfill those? So that's a huge part of the conversation. There's many things that can go into what the goals of the community are. And so we're going to be talking about that in our policy discussion. And then finally, as I've noted before, King Street Common zoning contributes to these requirements, but there's also that geographic component. Next slide. So now we're going to start talking together, and I'm going to stop doing all the talking. These are the policy questions. We're going to start at the top left and move our way around. So we want to talk to you about public engagement tonight, data, as I mentioned earlier. We also want to talk about the district boundaries, so think back to those maps that we already showed, and whether or not there should be some areas in those districts. We're going to talk about different zoning types. I know that Littleton has different types of zoning, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about, I called it missing middle housing because that's a big planning topic these days. Missing middle housing is between the sort of single to four family and the big tall things that you see on 95. It's those 3 to 8 unit or 3 to 24 units. And when we talk about multifamily housing, it's important to understand that the minimum size for multifamily is a 3 dwelling unit building. So we can talk about quite a range of different typologies, different types of housing, different ways that they look, and different ways that they're incorporated on a site. So with that, let's turn to the next slide. And we're just going to take about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on which. I know the planning board has a public hearing at 7:30, so I want to throw it open to all of you, and we're going to start with the fun part, public engagement. How do you want to include the public as part of this conversation? Who needs to be involved and when? And which types of meetings are most useful? So we're looking at an April to June. We have options for doing in-person, virtual, hybrid, all three. We can do surveys. Love to hear your thoughts. And then also, well, let's start with that. How do we want to include people? Any ideas, any thoughts of what worked or hasn't worked in the past?
Can I start?
Yes, please, Maura, kick us off.
Anytime we have an in-person meeting, if we can have some snacks to share, it always helps break the ice.
Snacks. A woman after my own heart. All right, what else? Tips, techniques?
When we started the zoning years ago, we had, what did we call them?
Charrettes.
Charrettes, public charrettes. We even actually had food in some of those too as well we did them on Saturday mornings.
Was Saturday good? Was that a good time?
That was, we had
Good participation.
Yeah, very good participation. So if we're going to go this road, I think probably the charrettes again would be the most.
For the master plan as well.
Yeah,
Those were,
that's what we
I
did.
think, the most effective ones instead of the large meetings. I don't think are very useful.
No, the charrettes that we did for the master worked out very
They're more
well.
focused.
Well,
So
we
you had
did the
mapping exercises with the charrettes. What was it that really resonated?
because they were broken out into
Okay.
groups, and we
Smaller
actually
groups.
did it specifically for the Littleton Station area. So we have a lot of data from those charrettes as it is, but to do that again.
I think seeing examples of architecture for form-based code and examples of types of elements and sizes, it really helps people visualize and give concrete feedback on what they like and don't like.
But are we
Having
looking
big
at-
policy questions.
Are we looking at replicating what we've already done?
In terms of engagement?
Yeah.
We like to know what's been successful and what hasn't been successful, but certainly what you did was pre-pandemic, and so unfortunately the pandemic gave us a lot of new tools to reach people. So, for example, there could be a charrette or 2 charrettes, but then there could be a later lunchtime Zoom for people who don't, who come back home late to Littleton but still want to be part of the process.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that, but I guess what I'm asking is, are we looking to gather the same data we already gathered?
I think we're looking to expand on that data. So, yeah.
Right, the way Emily and I have talked about it already is to make sure that we're building on the information
Yeah.
that we had from before, not to recreate.
Okay,
Yes,
so we're not
yes.
going to replicate and ask the same questions, because people will be like, wait a minute, didn't we already do this?
No, I have an allergy to doing that.
To
Build on, not recreate.
build on with Lisa, we have a lot of it. We
Yes.
spent a year and a half.
Yes.
Public meetings, we were just about ready for town
Surveys.
meeting. At that time, we decided not to go to town meeting, but we have basically a working model right there. I think our hope is that we take what we have already learned and just fine tune it and make sure it's all still relevant post-pandemic, if you will.
Right.
But
And that's actually the reason for that analysis period that we have at the beginning, is we talked about looking at what's already there and then seeing where to go from there. So that's an excellent point.
I mean, the only difference now is that the governor has decided that we have to do it. Before, we were doing it voluntarily, we had our own ideas. Now, there's maybe a few more guidelines or rules we have to, let's put it hoops we have to jump through, but we had pretty much everything all set, where we wanted it, what we wanted, the density, so.
And we also know what our challenges are.
Right.
You know, where we're
That's extremely
encountering, where we're
helpful, yes.
encountering resistance and why. So
Yes.
I think we would certainly want help in figuring out how to address those concerns.
Excellent.
Sorry. I was going to say, how the Survey Monkey working out for the PFAC? Is that a valid approach?
SurveyMonkey is an excellent methodology, and we can do almost, and have done in the past, almost an online workshop with SurveyMonkey. So again, to those people who weren't in the room, and that's one of my other questions is, are there people that should have been in the room that weren't? That's a great way of reaching out to people. And we've used combinations of images, videos, et cetera.
So Emily, I think one of the other things that I'd like you to consider is actually a site visit, especially because one of the concerns that comes up repeatedly is the width of the road. And
Yes.
I think if folks who are interested would like to go out and actually experience it, that's always something very helpful.
It's a great idea. So I like both of those, the virtual and then the kind of the hands-on, physically being in the space. So you, sir, you were going to?
Yes, I was just thinking the public, we know what's going on at King Street and potentially the mill building as well. This all comes down to a vote at the end of the day. And if it doesn't pass, the people don't want it, then we're left with what? We're left with, when I just saw that presentation a few minutes ago, what struck with me is a bus terminal. Well, we have 800 units potentially within a bus terminal already. So we've just met the requirements. So trying to sell it at the MBTA train station, I just don't see how that's helping Littleton. And that's my opinion, and I don't want to get too far into that part, but I know we're not talking about that specifically, but we've just met the requirement, and we're talking about Foster Street when we already have the requirement met.
No, but 20% has to be at the MBTA station.
Yes.
It says with a terminal.
No, because you're a commuter rail community,
Yes.
20% has to be at the commuter rail station. So, but you bring up an excellent point, which is what are the ramifications of not meeting the requirements? And I think that's an important thing to bring into the public conversation. It's like, okay, what do you want to do? What must you do? And what are the ramifications of not complying?
And the legality behind it, that's the other, I don't know how that can be enforced. You can force a town to rezone at the will of the people. It still has to be at the will of the people to rezone, correct?
It still has to pass town meeting, yes, that is
Yes,
correct.
that's-
So then there are ramifications if it doesn't pass, and that's exactly what we should talk about. And you, sir, you had a comment on that.
I had a different comment, but I think the ramifications are that the state can withhold funds of various forms. The state has various sticks that they could use. The town can still choose, not to vote the zoning. But I think one of the things that has, and I like your comment that we should use the information we got from master plan, but one of the things that has changed post-pandemic is the train schedule. It's not rush hour, morning, evening rush hour anymore. It's one train an hour all during the day. And I think a question many people will ask about this is, what's in it for us? I used to take the train, and it was a pain in the butt to drive to the train station. and there was some bus that I could have gotten from King Street, but that wasn't convenient enough to be useful. So I think we have to answer the question for the town to get the votes to say, what does it do for us?
That's absolutely right. It goes back to what are the community goals that can be solved or addressed by doing this. So that's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's move on to the next one, just because I want to keep us going. It doesn't mean that we can't go back to any of these, but again, I'm aware. So we actually just touched on this a little bit, right? Is what information is useful for the discussion. So we talked about images. We talked about pulling together what you've already had and building on that. We've talked about the what's in it for us. We've talked about ramifications. Anything else that you think would be helpful to people to understand? Yes, sir.
One thing that may be helpful is having the information that you were talking about, the exercises that we went through a few years ago, to say this is what we came up with and this is how we came up with it. So there's a starting point, because there's new people in town and people that weren't part of the process, and they can see what were the assumptions. Because when you did it last time, King Street wasn't on the table, right? So now it is, so the assumptions are different.
So a review process, basically,
review process
kicking
of
off with it, right?
What did we do before?
Okay.
Now this is what we're going to do going forward.
Right. Yep, that's a great idea. Yes, sir.
I think demographics too is important, right? I mean, just, understanding the ages of people coming in, so we can do some modeling around the schools, police, fire, et cetera, just the impact on services over time.
I think that's a good point, and there's all different ages to be thinking about, right? I mean, obviously, family-sized units are required by the zoning, but there's also young people who are trying to, young professionals coming into their first home away from their parents. There's older people who want to downsize but stay into their community. There's always issues of what size of unit is available, what type, one-floor living. So there's a lot of things to unpack on that. So I think that's really helpful. Other thought, yes, sir. And then,
Thank you. So one of the comments that was made by a previous planning board member, he had commented that there should be an economic basis for the development. And so understanding what those economic impacts are, which you have there, multifamily support for economic development. So having an economic analysis, I think, would be really helpful.
okay, that's great. That's music to our ears. So I'm glad that you think so as well. So, yes.
I think people hear density and affordable and assume it's going to be a giant block of apartments, and making sure that we present what it could be in a lower impact visual way is very important.
Yes. Yes, and that gets to that missing middle housing as well, which is that catch-all term for those smaller, different size, different ways of thinking about things. There's certainly, not just us, but our colleagues in the planning world have been thinking about, well, there are buildings that look like single-family buildings that hold 4 units, for example. So what else can we show to get a sense of what the community wants? So, great idea. Yes?
I just have a question. When you talk about they must be suitable for families, does that mean that every unit has to be multiple bedrooms, or is it just a percentage have to be suitable for families?
It's not even a percentage at that point. It's just that the zoning cannot, so some communities will allow multifamily, but only over a certain age, for example, or multifamily, only a certain number of bedrooms, so multifamily over 2 bedrooms, for example. So they're just saying that you can't do that.
Okay, so you can still have a mixture of one
Absolutely.
bedroom? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a great question to ask at this point. Yes?
Could you show us bring that slide up again that has the station area, and show us what a 50-acre area looks like?
Oh,
Is
I
that
haven't,
the ellipse, or?
Out of the ellipse.
So the red area there is 244 acres, you said? That's the possible?
Yeah, no, the red area is probably about 600 acres. For example, if we're looking at the parcel next to the commuter rail station, that's 34 acres. There, we already
So
have.
as you go up Foster Street, then we need to zone
more
a minimum of 50 acres.
Be 20 at the station.
20% of your
station.
district
Right.
station.
Right.
50 acre minimum total.
Right,
So-
if the town decides to include King Street as part of the MBTA district. Yeah, it would be 40 acres, and then you could have 10 acres
would have to be within a half mile,
minimum.
minimum of 10.
Correct.
Or 150 units, or 10 acres, or both.
So it gets complex. 20% of your total district has to be. So if your total district is 100 acres, which in some communities it might be, then 20 acres would have to be. If your total district is 50 acres, then yes, 10 acres would have to be within that half mile. But it depends on how big your final district is. So that's where the size of King Street might come into play in that.
And every acre has to be a minimum of 15 units per acre?
No, the district average.
Oh, okay.
And that's when we've got that slide on sub-areas. That's when we're going to get into the sub-areas because that becomes important.
So does that mean if King Street has a density of, let's say, 30 units per acre, then the other can go way down?
So the sub-areas idea, but it also sub-area of the same zoning district.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so one of the things that has to be presented in your data then is what exactly do we need to do in the station area that isn't covered by King Street?
Beautiful. Yep,
So
absolutely.
That's the big question that everyone's going to have.
Great for working us to that point, yes. Yeah.
Doesn't 20% of the units has to be?
Oh, yeah, 20% of the units as well, that's true.
Yeah, so it's not just the acreage, but it's also of the 750 unit minimum, 20% of that.
150 have to be.
Right, so, yeah,
Zone.
yeah. So 150 units on 10 acres, could work out potentially pretty well.
So, sorry, you had a great idea, but now we can't.
But the point of having what does King Street do versus what has to happen at the station, I think that's an excellent point. What are the parameters under which this zoning needs to be developed? I did talk, by the way, about the fact that you're going to get used to things like excluded land and sensitive land and other terms like this. Wetlands comes into this. So when you're drawing the district, you also have to look at what the underlying conditions are in terms of the excluded land that DHCD has identified, and wetlands is one of those. So, yes.
So the one other thing that has to also potentially be thrown in is 410 King Street then too, because that could completely change the picture too, because you could potentially, if you put all of those units together, you could potentially say that we have enough already, if we zone that whole big picture and everything else, that we might already have everything met. So we really need to sit down and figure out exactly what we need.
But you still have to
You
have
still have to have
20.
100.
No,
You still
because
have-
everything in
Mark.
that half, no, what I'm saying is if you count all the number of units that are already in that half mile, and, no.
It has
that-
to
and-
be,
No, I'm saying take that red area, and how many units are in there? And then take the other, and how many units are in there?
Common fallacy right there. It's zoned, what's allowed by zoning, not what's there already, which, let me promise you, is a source of much frustration to many communities. It's what could be there. So when you look at it, it's the blank slate if you rezoned it. So even if you had on this parcel here, say you had a very large building with a lot of units, but it came in as a planned unit development, or it was a variance or something like that, doesn't count. It has to be what the zoning allows. So it doesn't take into account what's already on the property. And we have worked with a community where they had a lot of multifamily. Almost every single one of them was some sort of variance or special permit. There's actually going to have to rezone that area for the multifamily that they already have. So, yes. We as consultants are sort of limited by the guidelines and the legislation. The towns are limited by the guidelines and legislation. What we're all trying to do together is work our way through. Do you want to pop over to the next slide?
Emily,
I think we've got, oh, yes.
Emily, real quick, I believe Mr. Faulkner had a question. Fred, did you have a question? I saw your hand up. No, okay, sorry.
Let's pop on to the next one, because I think we've got a lot for now. So, the district boundaries. So the ones that we were just looking at, the King Street and for around the station. When I talk about the district boundaries, what I mean is those that are used for the study, for what we're talking about now, as opposed to what the final boundaries will be. We are not talking final anything right now. But in terms of the context of these boundaries, are these the right boundaries to start with? Are there properties that are adjacent to those boundaries that you want us to look at? Are there properties that you don't want us to look at? So, Marta?
If I can jump off on
Yes.
that one. Over time, we've heard concerns about possible, or questions, could we allow for redevelopment of the underutilized office and warehouse spaces along Foster Street? You've got we call it the old Pella building where the Stoneyard just sold, the 295 and 305 Foster Streets, the two older digital equipment company buildings. Over time, we've heard questions from residents, why doesn't the town redevelop those? That could be a possibility for a redevelopment overlay district in that area to be part of the solution. Just wanted to throw that out as one idea that we've heard over time.
Right. And again, that doesn't mean that it's the final boundary today, but it just lets us incorporate it into the public's discussions if that's something that you want to do.
One of the problems we had when we did the original overlay, when we had the public hearings and everything, was that it was too big.
Interesting.
Too many
Okay.
units. We included the nursing home when we did the original, and that scared people because we were looking at 500, 600, 700 units out there.
Right.
Now we're looking at 750, but granted, the Common's going to share the lion's share of that one, but we still have a number, and people on Foster Street are going to be very concerned about what that number is. So we don't want to be too big. We're probably too big as it is now.
Understood. And just remembering too that boundary may shrink or it may grow in different directions from where it is now, but that's helpful. Any other thoughts on studying those properties at this point, or anything else for that matter? Yeah.
I just have comments. Throughout the Commonwealth, any community that is a commuter rail community, the commuter rail is in their downtown district. We have an outlier of a commuter rail that was put in after the fact on an old freight line, and it's not Reading, it's not Waltham or Needham or Concord. Yeah, so it's not in the downtown area. So to shoehorn a bunch of residential units into an old country road is not as conducive as putting them where we can kind of accommodate it. So,
You're mostly right. There are a few other communities where the commuter rail isn't downtown. Newburyport, for example, their commuter rail isn't downtown. They have and there's others. But the point is a good one, right, is that there are different conditions throughout the Commonwealth, and that's certainly one of the challenges of this process for every community, is what is the appropriate level of housing and density where. And actually, I can't remember the sub-area questions next, but when we get there, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that might help to address that in terms of how we're going to talk about it. Anything else on the borders? All right, let's pop over to the next one, which I'm pretty sure is sub-areas. It is sub-areas, okay. So we did talk about that fact that it's an average density of 15 units per acre, which means that around the station area, possibly including King Street, we'll talk about that as we go through. Do you want different levels of density? Do you want houses that have 4 units and sort of this kind of cluster versus houses that are 8 units per dwelling, versus, taller buildings here? That's one way to think about it, the layout. So in the fit studies that we do, we can test some of these ideas of sub-areas and what that would look like if that's of interest, and get that sense of how, not only how it would look, but how different sub-areas could potentially work together to create that overall average.
So let me ask a side question.
Yeah, please do.
Explain fit study.
Oh, yeah, good point. We sometimes forget the jargon. So fit studies, Chris, jump on me if I'm missing anything, is when we take land, whether it's a single parcel or multiple parcels together, and we actually do 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional to see in rough conceptual forms, so very blocky buildings, not very pretty, how much development volume could fit on it. And we use it to test what people like and don't like about it. So we might take the same parcel group of parcels and do 3 or 4 different levels of density on it. I was getting a head nod from Chris, so I got it okay. Yeah, you and
Yeah, I'm struck that it wasn't that many years ago that we put down where the Christmas tree farm was, 40 or 50, whatever houses that are, I think, each on an acre and a half, 2 acres, and putting what we're talking about here would be pretty jarring compared to that. And it's when I first heard about this, I thought, my God, didn't we just put a whole slew of houses down there? But I know it's a different density and all that.
there's also, different ways of thinking about it too. For example, some communities do cluster zoning where they might have denser development further away from the street if it's a more rural area. So what you see from the street is not the housing. People do different things where there are townhouses laid out around a campus or a common. There's a lot of different options that we can look at, again, to see what fits. You mentioned over here the visualization of just showing image after image and say, what do people like? And then we can say, use the fit studies to say, well, you like X. How does it translate to this area? Does it work, and how does it look, and how do you like it? But it's a very good point of thinking that, one family on 1 acre lots, and then you're looking at something where it's 15 units per acre. What does that feel? But it also depends on what the form of that building is. So that's really important. I think you had a question.
Yeah, I think we have the natural break point between King Street and the station area itself, right? But I think knowing we have to have diversity of housing, the sub areas make sense by helping people utilize it and really try to solve the needs, right? So I think it would be an important part of the conversation.
Wouldn't the sub-areas follow from the fit studies and not the other way around?
Generally, we might look at the geography as well to say, okay, this one makes sense to test at these levels of density. That one makes sense to test at these levels of density. So it's a back and forth.
I think that the density of the housing voted on by the town is right where it belongs right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mark alluded to, you got to be very careful with the density down there if regarding, I guess, the will of the town to want something like that. So that would be probably one of the main questions I would ask if you have charrettes or whatever, what we're looking at down there. I think it's the less, I just can't imagine anyone in Littleton. I know there are communities that want housing, buildings, but I just, unless I'm misreading our community, I have a really hard time thinking that we want to see apartment buildings down there. So that's just something that you have to be very sensitive to.
But that's helpful to know in terms of how we collect the types of images that could potentially work. So
I think what you really need to do is start where we ended.
Yes.
You need to bring the plan back that we were just this close to bringing the town meeting, which had apartments, had some empty nester housing, it had some senior housing and everything else. Bring it back to us. Now it's different now because back then we didn't have 700 units going into the commons. Show it to us again and see where everybody in the room, where it falls out with them. Maybe, like you said, the apartments might have to go. Maybe it's going to be more duplexes, quads, smaller units out there, but at least that we need to start there because that's where we ended.
We also should probably look at it according to the new guidelines and make sure, how close is it to compliance as is, and if so, that if yes, great. If not, what needs to be tweaked?
Well, I think the issue is going to be you're going to find that most of us don't have a tolerance for the density that was being proposed back then. Now, having what we have in front of us now.
Well, and now we're talking just about 150 units, which is significantly less than we were originally talking. So what would 150 units look like? I think that's getting back to how would we, some sort of visualization. Because I think there'd be
Well, the other thing you have to do
for
is,
that.
but while you're doing all of that, you have to come up with you have to give us an idea or give whoever's going to be doing this an idea of what what's the minimum number of units that have to go out there to support it, because.
Well, it's
you-
150, right?
No, but you have to be able to physically build a sewage treatment plant out there, so 150 may not be enough units. We need some, if we're gonna do it, it has to be viable, so you're gonna need an analysis of what it's gonna take to put something out there and how much it's gonna cost. Because we don't have sewer out there, and we're not gonna have sewer for a while. You could say, oh, we can only put 150, but if no one will build it because you can't physically make the numbers work, then what are we doing? You know, so we have to be realistic in what we're approaching
That
out
doesn't
there.
matter for this point, right? Because we need to zone for 150, we don't have to make it cost effective.
Well,
We do. The state will not approve a district that is not going to be economically feasible to develop.
right.
So
That's-
that's part of the regulations.
That
That's
150 units isn't economically
part of what we'll
feasible.
be applying to the state to help us determine.
Yeah, that's what's gonna, you have to, just because we zone it, you have to be able to, you can't, it has to be, it can't be illusionary, it has to actually really work.
The state will be checking that. That's an important point, is that you can't just say, oh yeah, we can totally zone for this, and then somewhere down in the zoning, whether it's the zoning for that district or the rest of your zoning, there's a little clause that makes that development completely infeasible. The state will be reviewing your zoning. There's a process by which they look at the zoning to make, you make an application saying you comply. There's a process. I saw you, sir, and then I saw you.
Just a question and a comment. Does it have to be rentals, or could it be like condos and townhouses in there?
Ownership is not it's whether it's rental or ownership is
It doesn't matter, good. And then the other, for the sub-areas, is when you're showing the different pictures that you're gonna show, that would be helpful, because I live on Foster Street, and somebody mentioned the senior, the, whatever it's called, right? Yeah, and I used to walk up and down the street to go to the train, and I live on the street, and I've never actually been in there, and it doesn't look bad from the road, right? So I think the pictures would be helpful if we could see what it kind of would look like. It doesn't help with the traffic issue, but with the pictures of seeing what it would look like, if it kind of looks like the senior center or senior living, then it may not be that bad visually. Yeah, so if it looks,
yeah. Okay, that's helpful to know. And represents how important visualization is.
Do you have any data as to what Weston, Lincoln, Concord, and Acton are doing on this? And it just, I can't imagine at least 3 of those towns putting in 750 apartments to accommodate the MTA.
So that's an excellent question to look at neighboring communities and we would have to go back and look at what their requirements are. So because it varies by the community type. So you're a commuter rail community that has one. The subway communities have, the adjacent communities have a different requirement. The adjacent small towns. Okay.
They're all on the same train line.
I thought they were, but I wasn't positive. I hadn't looked at the map again before. Eric, yeah.
Just around Acton, it reminded me, I just saw that MAPC is going to be doing a South Acton train station study with the town of Acton, so I imagine they're in the same position as Littleton, starting to gear up for how they're going to address their requirement.
So
we want to be leading the pack here.
We're drifting from the sub-areas, but one concern I can hear being raised is, yeah, you showed us all these nice pictures of 40-unit buildings, but there's 40-unit buildings that you showed us, and then there's the 40-unit blunt that they built over there. We have no control once we zone it. They're going to put up whatever's cheapest for the developer, and we don't want that.
Right. So if you want to flip to the next one. That brings us to zoning types. Excellent segue. So it gets into the type of zoning that you want to set up, and you already have experience with the form-based code. So we can pull up this idea of how do you want to set up the uses, because you can have more uses than just multifamily in the area. You just have to make sure that you allow multifamily. How do you want to think about the different types of dimensional standards and development or design standards, so to your point about how it looks? Do you want traditional zoning, which is mostly text? It's called Euclidean zoning, mostly text. very use-based with some dimensional standards, or do you want something that's more like the form-based code that you have, or a hybrid of the two, so that you have a little bit more on the design control? Now, you do have to be careful with the development standards and the design controls, because it's possible to set them up such that nothing happens, and DHCD is going to look very closely at that. But you are not prohibited from putting those in. So that is something else that, you know, if you have a preference for any of those now, or if you'd like us to talk about all of them during the process. But your point about the design and the control of the design is a really good one. So I would love your thoughts. I don't know if you've had, how much you've been working with the form-based code yet, versus, you know, having it in place. But any thoughts that you have on that would be really helpful. The other thing we could do is, or, you know, we can talk about, and I've been working with another community on this, is having a certain level of development standards that, because this has to be done by right or by site plan, there's and I can share this with you, Maren, a way of setting up development standards that staff can check off on. So even though it's by right, there's still a staff review of have they met these development standards before that building permit is issued. Again, you can also put in site plan review, but as you know, site plan review is limited to certain things. It's more about, you know, access, stormwater, you know, site plan review, so it's site issues, but there can be a little bit of development standards in that as well. So just to think about your preferences. Yeah.
If you go back,
You've already got some of this.
we already
I
did
know.
all of that. We had
Yeah.
fit and finish, we had what we liked, what we didn't, how we wanted the trees, how we wanted the road laid out, so.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying we should start
Yes.
where we stopped.
Well, I think it's helpful for the other boards too to hear how much you've done to date.
We
so.
droned on with them for a year, they've heard it.
Got it. You've been hearing this already.
If I may speak. Hi,
Yes, of
Cindy
course.
Napoli from the Select Board. If anyone has not looked up, please look up the Littleton Station Area Report. We spent a lot of time on that report. It was a few years at least. A lot of the information that we've already covered. And to Chairman Montanari's point, we really need to dust off that report, and that's a great starting point for this whole process. And I just want to differentiate between, as we're having this conversation, between the Common and Foster Street when you talk about this, because we've already have everything in place as far as the Common goes.
Yes.
As far as form-based code, we have the Littleton Common Revitalization Report. So all of that is in place thanks to the work of the Planning Board and Maren for the past few years. I personally, hearing this whole conversation, I feel like the state is just really putting us in a bad position as a community. I appreciate the need for housing, that we have a housing crisis, but I really feel like this is not going to solve the problem, because it's what the market will bear. We're going to end up with is a bunch of housing units in Littleton that are not affordable. They're not going to meet the need for our community. That's my personal opinion. So I appreciate, you know, the governor wanting to put this in place across the board for all these communities in the state, but I have a lot of apprehension. I think Littleton has done a great job on its face as far as creating housing, being proactive. You know, this is a great step to diversify our housing stock, which is something that we're lacking. You know, we have a lot of housing that's going to be coming in on the Common. So whatever's going to happen down by the station area needs to be very conservative, in my opinion, and really keep in mind the impact it's going to have on our community as a whole, because we're already looking at a big change up at the Common area, and this is just a whole nother piece adding on to that. And one thing that really needs to be taken into consideration throughout this conversation is our school system and the impact it's going to have on our roadways and our highway department, police department, and our fire department. Thanks.
That is really helpful, thank you. And thank you for putting it so succinctly of all the different things that we should take into account as we look at this. And I do appreciate the work that you've done already, but I'm also aware that there are people at home who may be listening to this meeting at some point, and understanding from you and from all of you, the issues that you'd like to see that the study is taking the work that you've done, building on that, considering some of the things that happened during the pandemic that might change some choices, and also realizing that you didn't take it to town meetings, so what work do we still need to do on that? So we're finding this very helpful. Yes?
So one comment that I received from somebody who lives on Foster Street as well is, you know, granted, there's probably going to be some sort of development near the train station, but the comment was to try to fit the flavor of Littleton.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, the fact that it is still somewhat rural, but and that narrow road exemplifies that, to be able to keep it along those lines so that it doesn't go from being rural to all of a sudden bright lights, big city, and then back to rural again.
Right. So having that feel be consistent all the way through.
Yeah.
And also that sense of identity, right? You don't want this to be anywhere USA where the buildings here look exactly like the buildings somewhere else. You want that sense that, oh, we're in Littleton still. Okay, that's very useful. Next one, Mark. So missing middle housing, we talked about this a little bit, but this, and I think I'm hearing from you this desire to have those smaller buildings, the sort of less dense development. So unless you have any other comments on this, we can probably go to the next slide.
Actually,
Yes,
ask
please.
a question relative to the multifamily being 3 dwellings per building. So could that be next to each other, not necessarily a triple decker, but there's
Yeah.
3.
You can have like 3 townhouses as opposed to a triple decker. Absolutely, absolutely.
Qualify for multifamily.
Yeah, and then that's where that cluster development idea gets in, right? Because you could have 3-family, housing, 3-family, 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 but it's those townhouses, it's all around a green, that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely, that's a possibility.
So just thinking a little bit here, we're actually talking the type of housing I think we'll want is more the townhouses and condos, because what's going on at King Street is more apartments, and we will still be missing townhouses and condos, smaller places, cheaper places for people to own rather than to rent. So if there's a way to zone it or prefer development that way, I think that would be better than more apartments.
And I love this idea of looking at what's already happening on King Street and say, okay, we've got this, or we're about to have this. What's still missing within the community that maybe around the train station would fit in? I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
But we can't dictate whether it's rental or ownership, right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, going back to what the state is sort of mandating us, if the state is pushing us to add these hundreds of housing units sort of associated with the train station, they're going to help us any in expanding the parking at that station? Because right now I know it's not an issue because no one's going anywhere, but I used to take that, I used to take the train and the lot was full by 7:05. And if we're going to, someday we get back to, we're never going to get back to normal, but someday we go back to a heavier usage with another 700 people possibly associated with the train station. There's no way the parking is going to be sufficient. I mean, forget driving down Foster Street.
So that brings up an interesting question. Eric, you may or may not want to jump in on this one, but the idea, we talked about the ramifications if the zoning isn't passed. One of them is you lose access to certain grants, like, for example, MassWorks. And some of these grants can help with exactly what you said when tied to the production of housing. I don't know if you want to add anything more to that. But remember, the zoning is linked to what's allowable. Actual production may involve exactly, a public-private partnership where the town is applying for MassWorks grants to improve roadways to allow for the development of multifamily housing, right? That's different from the zoning. In some cases, the T has been actually allowing the development of the parking lots, but with parking underneath for commuter rail. Now, that's probably not going to work, given that whole parking lot was filled. But my point is, those are issues that we need to talk about as part of this, but as how do you actually produce it versus how do you zone it?
Right. And
Yes.
there's only so much you can do with Foster Street. I mean, yeah, it'd be awesome to make it a 4-lane road, but you can't.
Right, yes, yeah. And I would firmly expect traffic to, and the implications of that to be part of this conversation, absolutely. So,
So I'm going to take
Yeah.
about 30 seconds to highlight a few of the things that the planning board's been able to do about parking. When the Foster Street is reconstructed from Taylor Street up to Balsam Lane, it'll have the multi-use path across one side, and the town and a property owner at the lower office building have agreed to include a little stub so that that underutilized parking area, the building owner can decide if he wants to lease or rent whatever space is there. And the board did include 30 commuter parking spaces at the Amazon lot. So the planning board's been acknowledging that it is a problem. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the town might still have a earmark from a prior economic development bond bill for parking at the commuter rail station. So that might be available for a developer to help with a partnership on some more parking, more commuter parking.
Better traffic flow within that parking lot, because people sure as heck did not understand how to park there. And, you know, one bad person parking, the way the whole thing flowed, one person could stop everybody.
Good point.
Very bad. My opinion. Not the greatest design of the parking structure.
Good to know. Mark, next slide, I think. All right. So we came up with some policy issues that we wanted to make sure that we touched base on with all of you. What didn't we come up with that you would like to talk about? What else should we know? Yes.
Just when we're thinking about next September, and we talked a little bit about this, is the financial implications of not doing this, but also doing it, right?
Yes.
So if you do this development, and then you need to do work on the road, how much is that going to cost? Putting in not a sewer, but whatever the technical term is for that thing, that's going to cost money. Instead of, if we go to town and say, hey, we're rezoning, and then next town meeting, hey, we need $500,000 for this, oh, $250,000 for this, you'll just kind of annoy people.
Right.
So I think thinking about what are all the potential consequences of not doing it, what do we lose? But then if we do it, what are the consequences there financially?
Right.
Just from my finance hat.
That's why you're here. So perfect. That's great. Other things that we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure that we covered? Yes.
Where does the affordability component come in?
So they just changed that to relax some of the affordability, but you can have an affordability component. I have to admit that I did not delve back into that because we were working on something else, but they were responding to communities who already had 40R districts that would not have complied with the first set of guidelines, and they have relaxed those. So I think you can have 10% at 80% AMI or less, and then there was the change was for specifically for 40R. Does that sound right? Okay.
Does Littleton have an inclusionary right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it by any chance 10%?
It is
Oh,
10%.
Beautiful. Then we're all set. We have to check the AMIs, but you know.
It is.
Okay, good, excellent. So then you should be okay. But yes, that you mentioned affordability earlier. You can have affordability, and the inclusionary zoning can apply.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, basically focusing on two properties here, 550 and then right at the train station. Within a half a mile of that train station, there's another 70 acres sitting on the top of the hill. Is anybody looking at that as a potential?
You're talking the Gutierrez property? The Gutierrez? Are you talking? Right at the end of Taylor Street, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the red zone there.
Yeah.
It is.
It's just a different option. If one doesn't work, does the other work? I don't know.
And we're at least starting with everything in that red zone for our initial analysis. So yes, anything in there we'll be looking at. Absolutely. That's a good point. Anything else? Eric, anything on your side that we haven't mentioned or that you've heard that you want to touch? Here, you can have this.
Martin, I forgot to ask you earlier, or if anybody else knows, for the King Street development, did you guys have a fiscal impact analysis done or anything that we could take a look at? Just from the fiscal and economic side, I've heard that come up a couple times in terms of revenue versus town cost.
There was a limited amount of information that went into the grant application, the MassWorks grant application. Happy to share that with you.
But not a specific fiscal impact where they compared property taxes to town cost or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
All right.
So we're moving
See?
faster than we thought. So the one thing I should mention that I forgot at the beginning was a big thank you to EEA for the planning assistance grant that allowed the town to hire the Innis Associates and subcontractors to do this work.
Is the station report still available? Can we put
It's all up on the
It's still up online?
Littleton Station page.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think we
everybody,
both downloaded it as well, so.
everybody should probably take a look
Right,
at it if they
right.
don't remember what it was all about.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that's been done over the past couple of years is still uploaded. You can access it from the planning board page.
Yeah, I was very impressed by the amount of information on that website. So Mark, if you want to go to the last slide, I know you've been jumping around like a hero today. So thank you. So this is just our next steps. I mentioned it earlier. We're going to do the public outreach plan to Maren by 12/1, just with our suggestion of how we're going to have this conversation. We'll go back and forth with her about it. Then we'll be working on our initial analysis of the area, the physical areas, the zoning, the work that you've already done, come up with our summary by 1/15, January 15th, which is not as far away as it looks. And then we'll be starting to work based on that, on the fit studies for the scenarios and feeding that into the public engagement. So I know there's some people who have been listening in the back tonight. I know there are probably people who are watching on television at some point. So we're hoping that they spread the word that this process is happening. And as soon as we have dates on the calendar, we'll get them to you and start figuring out ourselves how to get that public outreach and then the engagement in. So if there's nothing else, thank you so much for your time. We'll give you back a little bit of your time for a break before your hearing, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you and hear from all of you so early in this process. It's a luxury we don't always get, so thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I can't do anything.
Well, actually, the Affordable Housing Trust is in session.
We can do that
And-
right now?
And there is one application for a LRAP.
So I'll turn it over to Bartlett then, since that's your bailiwick, Bartlett.
Yes, it is.
I don't want to step on your toes.
All right. Do we have a forum of the housing?
I think we're going to adjourn the select board meeting.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn. Moved by Cindy, seconded by Chuck. All those in favor say aye. All right, we're adjourned.
Okay, well, we're just gonna, we have a little bit of Affordable Housing Trust stuff to do.
Yes, that's fine, but the select board can now go their separate ways.
Don't you want to stay for our next, don't you want to stay for the rest of our
I'm
meeting?
going to stay.
Okay.
I'm here for the whole night.
I think Maren got cookies. Did you get cookies, Maren? Any snacks? You said you were getting snacks.
All right.
That's what, I posted the maps instead.
Should we go over there?
I think we can stay.
Do it right here.
Angus and Susan, can you come up here?
Yeah, go ahead. It's gonna take like 2 minutes, a minute.
Okay. I hope you've all seen this application. I'm going to call this meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust to order. Whatever time this is.
So,
Mr. Chair, does he have to start a new meeting, or is it just okay to do this?
Well, I just called it meeting to order.
You guys.
Okay.
Has everybody seen this and read it? It's a new LRAP application. Income 22,000, one person, current rent 405 a month. Does it say how many points? 9 total points. That's pretty high.
That's what I heard.
Any discussion?
We're gonna have zoning protection anyway.
I'll
Zoning
entertain
protection
a
anyway. Let's just
motion.
start this meeting. We'll protect it. It's a moratorium until we go to town meeting, so it's not gonna
Okay,
matter.
made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah. But I heard
No,
that you.
hearing none. I
That's all
will
right.
ask for a vote. Can everybody, do we have to do roll call? Can everybody just say aye?
Aye.
Yeah.
Since we're, okay. All in favor, say,
Aye.
do I hear any nays? No? It's unanimous, approved, done.
And that's good for another month.
All right. Motion to, are we done? Motion to
Hey,
adjourn.
we should probably have something about Millie, right? Should we, she was on our board, and then she passed
She
away.
was for a long time, and she was very, yeah.
Maybe we should do something, right? You know? She just passed away last
You
week.
know, like the housing authority, she was on that, or she was on this. I mean,
She was
there's a whole bunch of boards that
Yeah.
probably would do something.
Maybe we should do some sort of memorial or plaque or some sort of
Definitely
remembrance
something
of
for the
it.
senior center.
Yeah, definitely. We
Yeah.
should come up with something for
But I wonder
that.
if we should like put something at the crosswalks.
Yeah,
A little bronze goat in the middle of the road.
One else is Millie.
we should do something. We really should come up with
She's like that.
That's true.
She, what? No, I don't know if she was sick, or she just passed away Sunday. She had a heart attack, yeah. So, yeah, we'll name the building, we'll do something, yeah. Yeah. Too bad. 94? 94, right? Yeah. Too bad. Yeah. But like, hopefully I'll make 94. Who knows? God, 94. Anyway, well, we should think about
Yeah.
something.
We should,
So we
yeah.
should add it to a future agenda.
Oh, yeah, what's our next meeting?
Oh, God.
December?
It was on the
December 12th or
Agenda.
something like that, or?
Yeah, and that's the question on when the next AHT meeting should be. It'll take me a minute to get to a calendar. Be a long time to get to a calendar.
The second would be the 12th, the Tuesday?
Yeah, it's usually the second
Tuesday would be the
right?
13th of December. Which is fine with me.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, next meeting Tuesday, the 13th of December at, what do we normally do, 7 o'clock?
6:30?
6:30? 6:30.
And,
Okay, that's the next meeting.
Prefer Zoom?
Zoom, yeah.
Everybody is going to come in with 5 ideas of how to commemorate Millie.
Sure.
Yes.
And, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask if we can go ahead and put another item on the agenda for that December meeting.
Yes.
Dr. Michaels and I have been working on some proposals for the senior residential development bylaw that we'd like to present.
You'd like to present a very, okay. Senior bylaw.
And I hope I'll have the RFP for the Habitat House on that meeting.
They build them on an Acton right now, you know.
Are they?
Yeah, right off of 27. I go by it all the time, yeah. Yeah, Acton
Okay.
on the way to Carla, yeah. What?
Is it a duplex?
No, it looks like a small little cape, single-family cape they're building. Yeah. They got acid at school, they're working there all the time. Yeah, they got it all staged. Yeah, they're doing a nice job. They're moving right along.
Wait, that's the Habitat House?
Yeah, it's a Habitat House in Acton.
Oh, in Acton, okay. It's not my jurisdiction. Okay.
All right.
We have 3 items on the agenda for next time, plus whatever
Maren can make up.
Marion can dream up.
Adjourn?
Yes, let's adjourn. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you. Good for a month.
Thank you.
Good.
So are we going to go on to board business?
Yeah, you want to do board business
Yeah,
while we're
let's
killing
do
time,
it.
Maren? Maren? Want to do board business while we're killing time? Any board member updates? Come on, we got, what, do you need us right now?
Mr.
Painlessly.
Chair, you're on.
What?
Do you want me to mute?
What?
Do you want me to shut off the?
Do you want to what, move?
No, I said, I just wanted to tell you you're still on camera.
Oh, we're still on? Yeah, you want to talk about this on camera?
Nobody's changing hands.
You want to talk?
No, I'm just kind of looking through your agenda.
I'm going to open it up. We're going to talk about it briefly, about the steps of it. We're going to talk about whether it's feasible, how many units we think we can get. I think that's the big thing. How far, how we're going to set out the areas, what number is a legitimate number.
Are we doing board business?
Walk through it. We're pretty much, everything's pretty much done. We've done a great job. It's pretty much all set to go. Maybe have one more meeting, but I can't.
Kind of a wait.
Yeah, I think so. Do you want to do a presentation or you want us to do it? No? No. Not really.
I think it's better to answer questions.
Yeah, we have it in front of us. We'll go over the highlights. Maybe we'll do it that way. Go over the high points. Yeah.
103.
All right, thanks.
Pretty much totally with it.
Yeah, board business. So any minutes from September 19th, October 25th?
I reviewed them. I have
Nothing?
no changes.
Anyone else?
Say that again?
We're doing board business.
Board business we're doing right now. Anybody a problem with board?
We had minutes?
Yeah.
The minutes of the 19th were posted.
Yep, I read them. I didn't have any
I
changes.
didn't read them.
Do you care?
I don't care, no,
Okay.
they look fine to me.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll
But I
second
didn't
it.
read them, no, I'm sorry. I want to read them.
They were,
It's 2 and 2, he didn't read them either.
okay, fine. We won't approve them then. I mean, I didn't know if that was such a big deal. 9 times out of 10, Marvin's perfect. Okay, bills, we have any other bills?
Yep.
Okay, let's,
The bills are coming around. We also, now that K and Jerky is substantially complete, we have requests from the developer to return the unused peer review fees and inspection fees. After we pay the last 2 inspection fees from Green, we return $5,789.58. It's so much because we had 3 separate accounts and one of them got lost for a while.
Okay.
We were able to find that. And, I ask for your vote to return those funds to the developer.
does anyone have a problem returning the funds?
Nope.
We're all done, the peer review's done, the roads have been accepted, good, right? We're done with everything.
The streets have been accepted. Town
5,000.
council is working on getting the easements, the deed recorded.
Okay, send it along. I'll entertain a motion to approve the excess peer review funds.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And let's sign it.
Aye.
Any board member updates? Anybody have anything from a week ago, 10 days ago? No?
No.
No? Town
Just
plan?
one quick item. So the CPC met tonight to rescind the vote for the tennis court project. So,
Okay.
That was it.
What am I doing?
Mara, did you forward the bill?
Here
You
go.
signed it.
No, not that one. The one to send the money back. So is there something we have to sign or we just voted it?
No, I'll send that, you don't sign that one. Thank
Okay.
you. I'll send that vote to the treasurer
So
and that will start
the
the
tennis
process.
court, we're not funding the tennis court?
Not that project right now, no.
Okay. How about the survey for the town planner, bicycle pedestrian plan?
Yep, the survey is up, over 650 full responses so far, so it's been very well. BPAC and Planning Board will meet jointly. Actually, this needs to really come off.
Okay.
Keep trying to.
When will they be posting results?
They'll be sharing results with you at your remote December 1st meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's remote? Okay.
Yeah, the
think,
December
yeah.
1st is remote.
I think I forgot that it was
Hoping it to be a joint meeting with BPAC. MAPC will be ready to share the initial drafts, existing conditions study, initial results of the survey. And MAPC is really pleased with the response so far.
Cool.
We have the first and the Our next meetings are the 1st and the 7th.
The 7th, yeah.
We did 2, why? I forget.
We did 2 because that way we don't have to pay for our consultants at MAPC to travel to us. We
Oh,
can do
yeah.
a remote meeting for the
The first is a-
bicycle and pedestrian master plan.
The first is a Zoom.
Right,
Yep.
right.
It's 6 PM?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the
then
7th is?
The following Wednesday.
Back in 103?
Yes.
Yeah, I have those, okay.
Okay. Anything else? The board have anything else for the next 6 or 7 minutes? Don't see a lot of people either, which is a good thing.
So, Maureen, you're going to be sharing all of the Littleton Station information?
It's all still on the
Okay,
website.
so, all right. No, I just met with the consultants, but.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Have you you looked at the maps, right? Have you had a chance to see them? Okay. It depends on what part, which 500 are you talking from residences? Or
Yeah, so from sensitive receptors.
Yeah.
From whatever we want them to be a certain distance.
Right. I think that's pretty much the biggest decision we have to make tonight, I think. Everything else is pretty much all set. At least the way I'm looking at it, because I just want to have a number that the Attorney General's not going to throw away.
But what was didn't the AG just approve one of the towns? Was it Weston or Wellesley? They just approved Wellesley, and so was that 500 or 1,000?
500 from the residences or not between each other?
From sensitive receptors.
Okay.
Playgrounds, churches.
What about residential neighborhoods, 500 feet?
Wellesley and Brown regular distance from each other.
Yeah, okay. And the biggest determiner is how far it is from something else, from something sensitive, and that's where 5, 6 we can do, maybe from this map.
Yeah.
No. Actually, we can't talk about this before the meeting, can we?
I can talk about anything.
All right, go ahead, talk now. Go ahead. Well, must be nice to play God, huh? Nothing. All right, let's wait till the end, yeah. Because it's about the most important thing we're going to talk about, I think. Nice try. What, the 3 people that are watching couldn't hear us?
I have a graphic that says recess, if you want to take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah. We're not as well. We're about ready to start anyway.
Where are those cookies, Mark?
Yeah, thanks.
Still at the store.
I gave you permission to spend our money, and you didn't do it.
And then I didn't.
I know.
I put up the half of the maps that I had.
You were busy, I know.
Okay.
So how was Savannah, by the way?
It's great. Have you been there?
I've been to Atlanta, and I've been Marietta up that, but never got to Savannah.
So I was telling Mara that it is very different from Charleston. I've been to Charleston a couple times. It is well worth going to.
Yeah, it was good.
Really, really interesting. We went on a historical tour, and it wasn't burnt down by Sherman.
Yeah.
So they've got buildings from 16, 1700s. I mean, kind of like Littleton, but really, really beautiful and very southern. Great restaurants. Of course, you don't eat anymore, so you wouldn't enjoy it.
Try now.
So how's that going?
42 pounds in 11 weeks. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's going well.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's been easy. It really has been.
Yeah.
I lost 4 pounds this week. weighed myself on Tuesday, I lost 4 more pounds, airport was at 42 pounds. So, yeah. I rode yesterday, it's close my
Yeah, yeah. It was cold even in Savannah. Yeah.
Not cheap, but it's good.
Yeah.
It works, it definitely works.
That's great.
Can you see the difference? Can you tell? Can you see it in my
Yeah,
face?
yeah, in your face, yeah. Yeah, you're gonna be like, a year from now, you'll be like this little teeny man.
Okay. So that's it then.
7:27. 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes, yeah.
Are you concerned about this?
Oh, not at all. They didn't have a special plan for this, so I said, why?
I don't understand this map. I mean, I understand what these are and what this is for 1,000 feet, but it doesn't, I mean, everything else, everything that's white is residential.
Yeah, I don't understand either. I guess I'll explain it. It's the first time we've seen it.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I think we can get like, you can anything in town, like condos, like the new kind of yeah, no, we're gonna have so many with some really nice towns.
Yeah.
Wow, that is
I have just about 7:30. I know it's not Greenwich Mean Time, but it's
No, it's now
town of Littleton
7:29.
time. It's town of Littleton time. Everybody up? We're all here. Should we start? We should start. You have 7:30? 45. All right, I'll wait half.
45 seconds.
Are you charging by the minute?
What are we going to do next?
Are you charging us by the minute?
I don't know.
Oh, right.
Mark, where's Jeff?
What?
Where's Jeff?
Where's what?
Jeff.
Jeff's out of town, right?
He's in Cabo.
Yeah. Cabo.
Ah,
He's in
Nice.
Cabo San Lucas.
Watching the whales. Yeah.
Yep.
She said
Been there a
Cabo.
bunch of times.
Cabo.
Been there a bunch of times. It's nice.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been to Cabo. It's not a place that I want to go right now.
What is this?
That's the number of potential places where
Fun
it could go.
place.
Some of them.
Well, what to go?
Dealer's gun place.
Site, Littleton School.
Oh, no, this is what's around.
Warren, what's this?
It's not for me.
Came with the map. It just
It
shows
looks
you,
like it's daycares.
this is stuff that you can't have it near.
Oh,
Part of the circles.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, everyone, it's 7:30. We're gonna continue our meeting now, please.
The hearing notice.
Yes, a hearing notice. Lauren's gonna read the hearing notice.
The Town of Littleton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022 at 7:30 PM in room 103 asterisk of the Shattuck Street Town Offices at 37 Shattuck Street to consider a zoning bylaw amendment to add a new article to the Littleton zoning bylaw entitled Article 32 Firearms Businesses Bylaw, sponsored by the Planning Board according to MGL Chapter 48, Section 5. This proposed new zoning bylaw would define firearms business uses and regulate the location, siting, design, placement, security, safety, monitoring, and modifications of firearms businesses within the town of Littleton to minimize the impacts of firearm businesses on adjacent properties, residential neighborhoods, schools, and other places where children congregate, and to protect and promote the quality of the town of Littleton's neighborhoods, commercial and business districts, and the general welfare, health, and safety of the citizens of Littleton. Full text of the proposed bylaws and the amendment is on file with town clerk and planning board offices and can be viewed during their office hours or online at the town website. Any person interested in wishing to be heard on the proposed zoning amendment should appear at the time and place designated or provide written comment by November 8th if possible. Proposed hearing can also be viewed on LCTV or online at the LCTV interface. Please feel free to call the planning board office at 978-540-2425 or email m2littletonma with any questions. Note that the hearing notice that we were across the parking lot in room 103. I did post on the doors at 103 that we had moved to the larger meeting room to accommodate anticipated people and we did make that announcement on the website in a couple different places.
Thank you, Mara. So we have a proposed bylaw in front of us. I want to thank town council for drafting the majority of what we talked about into this bylaw. Maybe the quickest way is to have you go over the high points of it, and then we can discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Harrington, Town Council, offices at Mears and Harrington, Wellesley, Massachusetts. So you do have the draft bylaw before you. It's, in many ways, it's a standard special permit style bylaw in that it takes you through the requirements of obtaining a special permit to operate a firearms business. I can kind of go through section by section, but my sense is that you probably have a pretty good sense of most of the sections. So I'm going to zone in on what I think are kind of the decision points, but happy to talk about anything you or members of the public would like to talk about. So it starts with the purpose, and the purpose of the article is to regulate the location, siting, design, placement, security, safety, monitoring, and modifications of firearms businesses within the town of Littleton. We then go on to state that the purpose of our bylaw is to be compatible with state, federal laws and regulations. We then list the applicability, or what's going to apply to these businesses. They need a special permit. They need to comply with all necessary federal, state, and other required local approvals. It has to be located within the Industrial A or Industrial B zoning districts, and once established, they must comply with whatever special permit is issued. That takes us to location requirements, and Mr. Chair, I think this is probably one of the parts we're talking about. So the location requirements, in my mind, set up sensitive receptors, things we do not want these businesses to operate near, or in the case of the bylaw, within 1,000 feet. And so that's, so what the bylaw currently states is that no special permit shall be issued where such use would be located within 1,000 feet of a residential use, residential zoning district, or mixed-use district, public or private elementary schools, middle schools, or high schools, child care facilities, including family daycare homes, daycare centers, and/or nursery schools. This number 4 may be new to you, but it says any establishment catering to or providing services primarily intended for minors, including but not limited to establishments such as activity centers or commercial recreation centers. Examples given: YMCA, rock climbing gym, the Little Gym of Littleton, etc., and churches or other religious uses. 6 and 7, public parks intended for passive or active recreation and playgrounds. So this is probably a kind of a good time to talk about what this means. So we're setting up barriers to these, what I call sensitive receptors, but it's important that there still be actual locations where a gun business a firearms business can locate. And so I think what we need to do, and I think what we're in the process of doing, is we actually need to map this out, right? So, and there you have it. So, Maren, this is the areas that would be available, shown in red on the map, to getting a special permit to cite a.
Right, industrial B is the green, industrial A is the reddish.
Okay, so at first blush, Mr. Chair, you can see that there appears to be several locations in town. That's a good thing. We want this to not be a fantasy bylaw, that it needs to be able to actually service a business. And within these districts, I think we then need to maybe drill down a little bit, and I don't know if we've done this or if we can do this, but actually confirm that there are actual locations available. For instance, we don't want these locations to be in the middle of a lake, in the middle of a highway, or the like, right? We want them to be actual locations. Marisa Miller, who's here with me today, my associate, and I have had the opportunity to have a number of discussions with Allison Anderman, who is the senior counsel at the Giffords Law Center, so who's honestly been a great resource for us, and I think maybe some other members of the town too. We've been able to talk through our issues and concerns with the bylaw and get her feedback. And the one thing she told us about this specific issue is we want to make sure that we're reasonable, right? So, and I think that takes place in two ways. One is this bylaw will need to be approved by the Attorney General. So the Attorney General, I believe, is going to look at this to determine if she thinks it's reasonable. We know that Wellesley was just passed. Wellesley has a 500-foot sensitive receptor buffer, and we represent Wellesley as well as Littleton, and I can tell you that the Attorney General in that instance wanted to see a map. Wanted to see that there were actual locations which we were able to provide. So I take this as good news, that there are actual locations available to be cited. And I guess the part two is that we make sure that we drill down and that there's, that there's buildings available to locate in, or vacant lots that are available to have a building constructed on them, so that we're providing a real opportunity here and we're not playing a shell game, because the shell game's going to get discovered.
So we do have a map. Maren and the GIS people put a map together with 1,000-foot boundaries around it to kind of map out where we could or couldn't cite these in Littleton.
Mm-hmm.
We've come up with 5 or 6 possible locations.
Yep.
Some of them have buildings there, some of them don't have buildings, but
The ones that don't, are there lots eligible?
one's in the middle of a quarry, so I don't think that's really
Okay.
eligible, but.
All right, so let's discount that one. Yeah.
But yeah, there's still, it's mostly Foster Street, Taylor Street, where the big industrial parcels are, because we have to stay 1,000 feet from the residences is what
Right.
knocks most of them out.
Right.
Like, you looked at the building, like, for instance, the Stone Yard. You really can't put one there because it's too close to residential. Even though there's a building, there's nothing else around it, but it's too close to residential. That's
Right.
at 1,000 feet.
Right.
So the question is 5 or 6 an adequate number? Is that, or do we have to think about going 500 feet from residential lot
So
lines?
that's the $64,000 question, right? So what I can tell you is that the courts haven't acted yet. They haven't issued a decision saying, 5 is enough, 4 is not enough, right? So we don't know what the actual number is. And again, in discussions with the Giffords Law Center, their advice was be reasonable. We don't have actual numbers, so let's be reasonable. I think it would be a useful exercise, Mr. Chair, if we knew the difference between 500 and 1,000, right? So,
Okay.
so if we show a 500-foot and 1,000-foot, are they kind of essentially the same anyways, or are we buying more places, or opening up more places because it's 500 feet?
I think you are, because if you take like Distribution Drive, you've got a couple of big buildings in there that are already built.
Yep.
That are 700 feet from the residential. So if you drop it down to 500, you're going to add a couple of buildings there. You're probably going to add a few more other smaller little industrial buildings that could, you're probably going to double what you, I can't say for sure,
Okay.
but we should probably, I
Okay.
agree with you, maybe we should do that exercise.
I think it's a useful exercise, and I'm not saying 1,000 isn't the right number.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I know the courts have upheld 500.
Right.
So, as we approach this, we want to be secure, right? We want to know that we can defend the bylaw we pass. I know we can defend 500 based on current case law. I don't know that we can defend 1,000 based
Okay.
on current case
So maybe
law. But if we can make the reasonable argument, the argument that 1,000 is still reasonable and still, allows this type of commerce to occur in Littleton, we might be okay, right? But I guess from my perspective, we want to drill down on the facts, and we want to understand factually on the ground, what we're opening up.
What about, so like, we have the point in there, there's some spots way in the back of the point that could be viable for a, not that they will be, but they could be viable for a firearms dealer. But the fact that there's public meeting space there, and there's a potential for, like, there's a rock climbing place, so that.
Right, so the rock, there's a rock climbing
Yeah.
place, right? So remember, that's one of our sensitive receptors.
And a movie theater, so that would probably knock it out,
But
right?
the homes also. up
Yeah, the
above.
homes, but yeah, there's some
Yeah.
further closer, but, so,
So I know based on what we have drafted so far, the rock gym they're not going to get within 500 feet of the rock gym. And I don't know how close the residences are.
well, 1,000, we're at 1,000 feet.
Yeah, if we were to go down to 5, because I think our discussion, Mr. Chair, was
Right,
if we
500.
went down to 500, what additional spaces does that open up?
Okay. Well, maybe we need to, for our next meeting, to find out what the difference is. But right now, we're probably at 5 or 6. Let's say our best guess scenario is 5 or 6, I think, that we've isolated that will work at 1,000
Right,
feet.
so we've identified 5 or 6 locations on the map. If we can look at those locations and confirm that they're real opportunities, is probably the best way to say it. Again, at 1,000 feet, without having case law to rely on at 1,000 feet, if we can make the argument that there are a reasonable number of opportunities here, it's likely defensible.
Okay, all right. So we'll discuss that. I think, does the board have anything they want to ask about that?
No, I really like the idea of having a map or something that actually shows what that distance could mean. And also, I think it would be helpful just to actually get an understanding what 500 feet from building A to building B means, so.
Okay, so we've done 1,000, so we'll do another variation at 500 feet before we close, obviously, before we vote this. You had a question about it?
I did. I was wondering on number 6, you say public park intended for passive. I was wondering if that includes conservation land and land with conservation restrictions.
Yeah, I think, so any of our conservation land,
Would be included?
I would think so, right? It's passive recreation land.
Okay.
That's the purpose.
Okay. Sure.
Does it count residential zoning with other towns that are doing it, or only Littleton residential? Because, for example, the back of the point is up against Westford.
Westford,
Maybe
right.
there's residences in Westford that are 500 feet away, but not in Littleton.
I think it's currently drafted, it would include residences in other town unless we were to identify, only Littleton residences.
I think that's how I interpret it that way. Residential, no matter what town it is. It also takes into account air, the units over, the stuff over there. Okay.
So moving on, so we then talk about, in the location requirements section, we talk about how we're going to measure 1,000 feet. We talk about no firearms business shall be located inside a building containing residential dwelling units. So I think we've put this in what we consider a safe and appropriate place as best we can, by buffering those uses that we don't think are compatible with a firearms business. I think the next section worth conversation, Mr. Chair, would be section E of this same section 238. No firearms business shall be located within 500 feet of another firearms business. And then we talk about how we're going to measure that. You'll note that at maybe your last discussion on this was at 1,000 feet, and we reduced it to 500 feet. That reduction was Marisa and I doing that. And it was based on a discussion we had again with Gifford's Law Center. So again, we're working to be reasonable here, because we acknowledge that a firearms business is a legal business that's entitled to site in Littleton. And in talking about why would we not want them next to each other, right? So if it's allowed, it's allowed, and if there's two, there's two. Allison brought up the interesting point that one thing that we need to be concerned about under the heading of safety is, from what I understand, one of the concerns around gun stores is with theft, right? So, we assume they're going to follow the rules. We assume they're going to operate a safe, appropriate, and legal business. But they can't always control theft, and it's a target because people want weapons. So the idea of separating them is to make it a little harder for someone, if they're breaking into, if they're going to make a run at Littleton and they want to break into business A and business B, at least we separate them so that they're not in A jumping into B, hitting both locations and then leaving. So that's kind of the primary justification, at least from the Giffords Law Center folks, about why you separate the businesses. But when you get down to, is 500 better than 1,000, it becomes difficult to justify 1,000 over 500. They're not next to each other, which I think is what our main objective here is, but 500 versus 1,000 is up to the board in first glance, ultimately up to town meeting, but may be arbitrary. So we may want to think about that. And again, just going to the case law, we know a 500-foot buffer, not for this particular instance, but a 500-foot buffer in general has been upheld. So in this instance, it might be better to go with 500, but again, I just advise, and I don't have a specific reason to tell, that I can rely on, other than the conversations I've just shared as to why 500 might be better than 1,000. So I leave that to the wisdom of the board at town meeting.
Thank you. Does the board want to talk about that, or questions or concerns? I'll start. I think the intention is to show that we're trying to be realistic and reasonable about it. So I don't think there's a big difference between 500 and 1,000, and if 500's been upheld. Yeah. I think we should probably...
When we look at the map, it might be the same, right? So a 500-foot difference might have the exact same impact as a 1,000-foot difference. So again, it would be useful if we could drill down into the facts, so that when we're making these decisions, we understand exactly, how many, what it's going to rule out and what it's going to leave in. And I think that's the best way to make our decision.
No, my same comment applies. I would just like to get a sense of what 500 feet, say, from this building is versus 1,000 feet from this building, and does it make a difference?
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, those are the two big ones. Yep.
Okay. And honestly, so now it gets into the mundane special permit requirements that I think you're probably all very used to. Section 239 talks about how we're going to administer this bylaw and the procedure. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not, you know, what the application is going to contain. I think most of this is probably fairly rote. Signage, what signage what signage will require and allow in section 240, in section 241, security. So it does have increased security compared to a typical retail use, and is probably much more similar to the security you'd see with a marijuana facility.
So, Mr. Chair. if I
Go ahead.
may. So, I have a question that relates to 173-239B, which is around prior to the application for a special permit, what's required. I'd like to add the word safety in there, but I have a question related to that under security of 173-241 security. Item B, which says all firearm businesses shall submit a security plan to the Littleton Police Department for review and approval. That doesn't necessarily say when, and so when I was first looking at this, I thought that if the Littleton Police Department were to be receiving the operations and the management plan, shouldn't they also be receiving the safety plan, the safety or security plan at that same time? So my real question is, what is the timing of submitting that security plan?
Could you, again, point me to where the security plan, I see where you're talking about in 239?
Yeah,
B.
so 173-241B.
Okay, so yeah, so we have the security section, which is separate.
Right,
than
exactly.
our administration and procedure section.
Right.
They're going to have to submit both to the police department for their review and approval, and you would not issue the special permit until you receive the approval.
Right, but what I'm saying is, under 239, when they are submitting it says only, prior to the application, all firearm businesses shall submit an operation and management plan for review and approval, but I would like that to say, and security plan as well, as part of that.
She wants them all at the same time.
I got you.
Yeah, I want them all at the same time. Yes,
I
it's a
gotcha.
timing issue, and I'd like them all at the same time.
So instead of that, so keeping the current structure,
Yeah,
what if for B, we said prior to the application for a special permit pursuant to, and just put it in the
Yes.
security section?
sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Good, okay. Lead on, McDuff.
Okay. So then we move to section 242. We've just completed security. We're in 242, procedures and findings. This will be limited to the current permit holder. This is not a permit you get to pass on. Meets all other applicable requirements of the zoning bylaw. I think that the rest of this is probably you're used to these kind of standard special permit condition operations. Section 243, special permit conditions.
Excuse me, Mr.
yeah.
Chair. Sorry. So one more question under that section that you just finished under findings.
Yeah.
Under B3, it says provides adequate security measures to ensure. So now we're saying that the planning board finds this particular information to be so, provides adequate, and so I always have trouble with the word adequate. And B, the security measures, as we're trying to set it up here, is that the police department is involved, and so if we receive a letter from the police department saying that the security
Right.
plan is appropriate, then we can say that the findings show blah, blah, blah. But I don't think we have anywhere in here something that actually states that the police department should provide a letter in agreement, or what is the standard by which we know that it has been approved. Let me give you an example. When marijuana retailers have come in before, they say, oh yeah, I talked to them, and it's always best if we have something in writing. So is that in here somewhere, that we would get something in writing from the
So-
police department?
So I guess I have two ways of answering this. I'm going to take a look at B3 and see if I can tune that up a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
The part two of that is we ask for input, we expect input. In this case, we want an approval. We don't set forth the form of that approval. And in part, that's because we don't want to, we can't make an impossible condition. We asked the police for something, they didn't give it, you don't get your permit ever, right? So I take your point, and I have some concerns on the other side, but I think I'm going to be able to find a middle ground.
Okay.
All right? I just need to think about it a bit.
Yeah, that sounds great. And again, fully recognizing that it is the decision of the planning board. But typically speaking, like, again, with marijuana as an example, the planning board doesn't get to see those security plans.
Right.
So same thing here. I would presume that we won't be seeing those security plans, so how can we comment and approve
On the
something that we
adequacy,
haven't
yeah.
seen? Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question on the renewed annually and the not transferable. So if someone has a permit, and let's say 410, they had a permit, and then a daycare center decides to move in there, what does that mean? Can their permit be renewed?
I think
And can they no longer, and they would not be able to sell their business and renew it, is that correct?
So two things. I think they can continue to operate because when the special permit issues, the special permit is issued based on the conditions on the ground at the time of application. So if something changes after the fact, I don't think we can rescind or revoke a special permit.
Okay. But they couldn't sell their business and someone else could get a special permit because,
So the way this is written, yes, I think they can't sell their business with the special permit.
yes,
A new special permit would have to issue. I'm going to confirm this, but my understanding is at the time of the new application, we can then consider that a daycare center has located within whatever the distance is, and it would rule them out. And I'll add a third part. So if that's happening, right, so I always like to think of, zoning as a living, breathing thing, right? It's going to adapt over time. It's incumbent upon the town that if that's happening, that we revisit this to make sure that we continue to have real opportunities available to firearms businesses, right? So that if there's 5 locations and 5 nursery schools pop up, we're going to want to think about how to restructure that.
They have to go somewhere. They have to have the right to go somewhere.
They do have the right. It's interesting, if you just read the most recent case, which is from 2021, and the language they use for owning firearms is this, it's the same language they use to right to free speech. So just as I have the right to free speech on the town common, so do I have the right to, possess a firearm. So that's the way we need to approach it. That's the current standard, and we're looking to keep everyone safe, and we're looking to, as best we can, meet the current standards.
while I'm asking questions, I'd like to go back to 238. And when we say minors, what about can we put music schools under there too?
Which one are you looking at, 238?
We see any establishment, number 4, catering primarily to provide services for minors, like a music school probably counts, right? So
Yeah.
you might want to call those out specifically.
Do we have music schools?
We have at least
There's
2.
one in the mill.
There's one in the mill right now, and there's one over, there's another
Near
one.
the high school.
Wouldn't we consider that a school? So,
Well, we call out public or private, that's what the other question is.
Yeah, I think
They don't
we-
call out, they're not called out as schools and such, so I'm not sure.
I would not classify that as a school, because the way we've defined school, it's, elementary, middle, high school. That's something different. That's more akin to, the rock climbing gym, the little gym of Littleton, it's.
congregation of
it's-
young people.
Yeah, exactly.
And we do congregations of young people, but not old people, like the assisted living center or senior center. Do we want to restrict that as well, or is that not viable?
I don't think that's viable as I stand here right now. We can look into that, but it's so that I know how we,
You can't do it anyway. Because
Regu-
it's residents. You can't do within 1,000 feet of a residence. So that's what people living in the senior center or in a residence.
oh, okay, good point, all right. Then we don't need to reach that issue.
Not just anyway, are you done for now? Okay.
Okay. So going
Special-
back.
Yeah, you're at 243, right?
Right, so we've got the special permit conditions, which again are, I think, more or less your typical special permit conditions. I don't know why this strikes me as funny, but no drive-through windows, so we've been able to secure that. Section D, I think, is worth noting because it's likely changed. The last hours you saw were 9 to 5. The concern there was that we may be being more restrictive than we're being with other commercial uses. And we consulted, Marion consulted with the police, and they said that they're not concerned with.
Yeah, 8 to 9.
Right. Moving on, 244, termination of the permit. Again, a special permit for a firearms business is not transferable upon sale, transfer, or assignment of the firearm business except with the approval of the SPGA, so they have to come in and get your permission.
Mr. Chair?
Go
if I
ahead.
may. So I can understand why that might be in there, but I'd actually like to say no, that it's not just transferable, that they actually have to go through the permitting process again. So that's something that I would like the board to please consider, because, again, if we're going through this much effort and trying to ensure that this is a single, in my eyes, a single process, that if you're new to this, you need to go through the process versus just transferring a special permit to another entity.
So I guess I take your point.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to work on that, because to me, it seems obvious that if someone's transferring a permit, you're going to make them go through the same level of review that you made the first one do it. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something with that language, but I'll either eliminate it or I'll tie the two together in a different way.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we can't be perceived that we're trying to not promote the business. If somebody already has a going business, we have to hear somebody who wants to potentially buy it. We can't just arbitrarily say, no, we're not going to do it.
Right, we're, I think, obligated to treat them like any other commercial operation in town, understanding, however, that there are additional safety and siting concerns and operations concerns that we look at. 245, no accessory use of firearms business. So use, I'm going to read this one because I think it's important. Use of property as a firearms business shall necessarily be deemed a principal use for the purposes of the zoning bylaw and shall be permitted exclusively in accordance with this article. No firearms business may be allowed within the town on the basis that such as it qualifies as a permissible accessory use, right? So no business within a business. The business stands alone. If someone else wants to do it, they're going to do it in a separate standalone location. Severability is a standard paragraph we put in where if something is ruled illegal or unconstitutional, we just remove that section and the rest of the bylaw remains. And then at the end, you'll see that there's definitions that we add. And the definitions, you'll note that from your last your last review of this, we've eliminated some definitions that occur in other bylaws but are no longer allowed by the state, so we eliminated from your definition.
I have a question. So this is just for knowledge. So the federal firearm law includes manufacturer's license, but Massachusetts excludes those. So is that just because it's not part of our state law? I'm just trying to understand.
Could you ask the question again?
So there are different types of licenses for firearm businesses, and one of them is a manufacturer's, and it's not listed anywhere in our Massachusetts state laws that I can find. And so I'm just wondering why that is.
We will get an answer for you.
Okay, thank
Don't
you.
know it as I stand here right now.
Okay, thank you.
There was the definition of gunsmith here, that's the creation or alteration, or is that what you're asking?
No, I'll find it in my stuff and I can show it to Tom before.
Yeah, if you
he
could send
leaves.
me whatever you have, that would be
Okay,
useful.
thank you.
So firing ranges, you've got it scratched out.
Yeah. Okay, here's why. So a firing range is more about is more about possessing a gun and becoming proficient with the gun, as opposed to the sale. So we believe it's well within our rights to regulate the sale. We are concerned about adding a firing range to this particular provision for fear that it would not pass muster or may end up in court.
So we go through all of this. If somebody wants to come in and put a firing range in, then they can. We already have one in town.
Right.
So we can turn them down because we already have one and we don't need another one.
Firing ranges, yeah, no, I don't think we can cap the number of firing ranges. We actually talked about capping the number of firearms businesses in town too, and did not feel comfortable kind of being the first one to do that. But no, I wouldn't cap the number of firing ranges. I think firing ranges are already regulated to a certain extent by how they're located and how you can use them, but I wouldn't, because the case law on firing ranges goes to becoming proficient with a gun, which is a constitutional right, I think it would be viewed differently.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with the definitions issued by the state, and I was wondering if the definition of firearms would include tasers or stun guns or even mace canisters or other things that are dangerous.
He's left stun gun in there, so you must.
Right, stun guns
Is it
are
in there?
allowed.
Okay.
I don't think you can buy a taser. Can you buy a taser? You can?
You have to have a license, but they're legal, right? Yeah.
These definitions came from the statute.
Okay. All right.
We can, so perhaps for your next meeting, we'll provide some of the statutory citations that we were relying on, so you can see those.
Okay. So does the board have any questions of town council? Good?
No. Clear. I think we do depend on getting a map that shows
The difference.
offsets from residential, because, you know, 2/3 of the area of the town is residential. And there's a lot of boundary there.
Yeah.
Does the select board have any other questions before I open it up to the general public?
No, I do not.
You good? Anybody in the audience have a question? Raise your hand and please come to the podium. I'll go with you first, Brian, since I know who you are.
Brian Tarbox, Fletcher Lane. Have the, okay, well, I'm just, actually, I guess, am I supposed to ask him through you? Yeah.
whatever.
Has any bylaw with a 500-foot limit not passed? Because you said that 500 is passed, but I'm guessing we don't know anything about the 1,000.
We don't know anything about the 1,000. I don't know of a 500-foot bylaw that has not passed, but we can check to find out.
Okay, because I'd urge you not to give up on the 1,000 feet so easily, because I know it's not industrial A or B, but ignoring that for a sec, just looking on Google Maps, Littleton Cafe, which I would think I could run to with my holding my breath, is more than 500 feet away from here, you know, and if this was in industrial A or B, you could put a gun store where Littleton Cafe is, because it's far enough from here, and it's far enough from the Congo Church. Now, I know it's not industrial A or B, but I'm just saying 500 feet is not very far. So I would urge you not to give up on that so quickly. I don't care so much about the 1,500 of store to store. That makes, I totally get that. But hold on to the 1,000 if you can.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's. I think that the point is well taken, and I guess I just want to make sure that I'm making myself clear. It's not my advice that you give up on the 1,000. It's my advice that we make sure, if we're choosing 1,000, that there are viable locations available using 1,000.
Thank you.
And I guess I would add, and if I'm being really safe, and I looked at 1,000 versus 500, and it ended up with the exact same sites, I might lean towards 500 because I know a court has upheld 500.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Thank you. Janine Wood, 12 Christina Street. Just some things that come to mind. One, if we can limit the number of liquor licenses, why wouldn't we be able to limit the number of gun stores? I mean, those are things that are kind of outside the norm. I'm also concerned about the firing ranges. As I understand it, and I don't know the specifics, a hunter can't walk down Christina Street and shoot a deer that he sees in Christina Street because that's a very residential place, and he's shooting a gun close to residences. I don't know the specifics. Why wouldn't a shooting range be held to those same strictures as, you can't shoot within a certain amount of place from my house?
I think it probably is, and that's why we're not addressing it here. There's limitations and criteria for shooting ranges already.
Right. So we're good, because I don't know, I caught a tail end that sounded like, no, you can't do anything about shooting ranges. I'm like, but we have already things in place that would help us with that?
Yeah. So I guess, a couple of answers. So the first answer, so the United States Constitution protects the right to bear arms. It doesn't protect the right to drink or sell alcohol. I wasn't there when they drafted it, so I didn't have a say in it, but that is the Constitution. So liquor sales are much more heavily regulated because the power comes from the state and it goes to the town, and the town can regulate whether or not it wants to sell alcohol in town. Mm-hmm. It can't stop you from drinking alcohol in your home, but it absolutely has the right to control where it's sold, when it's sold, and if it's sold. A town doesn't have the same right with the sale of firearms. It's the
Okay.
law under which we live.
I forget how we repealed prohibition, but that seems, right? I mean, I don't want to argue with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
law with the lawyer, but I'm just like, hang on.
Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, firing ranges. So again, so firing ranges are looked at differently. And, so we will go back and do some additional research to get the town some more information on firing ranges. But the way the courts look at firing ranges, right? There's two things in play here, right? One is the sale, which is a commercial activity. So we know that people have the right to bear arms, right? To possess a firearm. That necessarily means they need the ability to buy it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be everywhere, right? It's not, every store doesn't have to have the right? We can limit that, we can have some control over where they're sold and when they're sold. The use of a firing range is different. Don't think of it, because I don't think the courts think of it, as a commercial entity. Think of it as, this is where I exercise my constitutional right to own a gun and where I become proficient with a gun.
But haven't we already said you can't exercise your constitutional right or even your right to hunt for food right outside my house?
So that the difference
Right?
there is, right, so it's your land, so you get to control what happens on your land.
Well,
The-
or
let
on
me-
the street.
Yeah. The street is a public way, most likely. The town does not allow hunting on public land. So all land that the town owns, correct me if I'm wrong, someone, but all the land the town owns, hunting is prohibited. It's our land, we get to make that call.
Yeah?
Someone owns 1,000 acres, it's private. I don't think we can tell them they can't have a firing range
Even
on
if
their
it's right
property.
beside a house?
They're not right beside a house, for
Well-
starters, and the other thing is,
But
most,
if it, well, I'm trying to say like,
most of the firing ranges are clubs, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're thousands and thousands of feet away from it. We're not addressing that. We're addressing,
it just came up.
No, and I know you, so, and listen, I take your point. I know you'd love to regulate them, and I would love to be able to deliver that for the town, but my best advice as we stand here today is to not include firing ranges in this bylaw.
Okay, I was just also seeing
No,
if
no,
they
no,
were
I'm-
covered
yeah,
already,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
like-
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ma'am?
Mari Borowski, 41 Ernest Drive. Along that note, why is you said you said proficiency is a right.
Yes.
Why is it a constitutional right? It's a right to bear arms.
So this is not my interpretation, this is the court's interpretation. The court has said they look at firing ranges different than they look at gun
Understood.
stores.
But do they say that having a firearm, becoming proficient with guns is a constitutional right?
I believe that's all, yeah, we can provide you with the case citation, but yes,
Yeah, I'd like the case
that's kind of the sum and substance of it. And as I kind of alluded to, the kind of most recent line of cases on the Second Amendment with kind of the recently new constituted Supreme Court are very interesting in how they look at it, right? And so they're comparing it to, gun ownership is being compared to your right to free speech. They are both kind of equal.
Okay. I've spoken with another lawyer who contests that, so I would love the case. He said it is not a constitutional right. In addition to that,
So he's,
selling...
right, so I guess, I'm sorry. And believe me, so as town council, I'll take advice from anyone willing to offer it in the hopes that we come up with the best bylaw we can. And my definition of the best bylaw we can is something that does what the town wants it to do and is defensible. Because we don't really have one without the other, right? We need it to do as much as we can, and we want it to be defensible. I'm happy to share the case. I'll share it through Maren if that's okay, and I'm happy to take feedback.
Sure. But I think sticking with that, the true definition of the Constitution is the safest. That's the most conservative, rather than interpretation of selling and also proficiency. So that would be my preference, and I would love the reference and all.
Yeah, so,
I'll also
so
get that.
here's where I disagree with you.
Okay.
On behalf of the town, as I stand here as town council, to me, the courts have told us how to define the Constitution, and that's what I'll rely on. I think that's my duty as a lawyer.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
need to rely
Okay.
on that as opposed to,
All right. All right, so also in addition to the 1,000 feet, I would also agree that 1,000 versus 500. 500 would allow somebody in the same shopping area to potentially get another distribution of licenses versus having to go to another physical location. So I think it would be safer to preclude them from, as we addressed in a previous meeting about buying different pieces and parts and then going to the next stop and then creating their own automatic weapons. So I think it's a safety measure that I would recommend. Third item is in regard to the items that were eliminated, such as the bump stocks and those things. Those are all components of automatic weapons. So for the safety of trying to respect the law of no automatic weapons in Massachusetts.
but what we deleted are not allowed in Massachusetts. So by putting them in our bylaw, I think we're sending out the message that these things may be legal when they're not. That's why I took them out.
Aren't they selling these components?
Not
My
legally.
understanding.
Not in Massachusetts.
All right. My misunderstanding. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Erica Podgorny, Fox Lane. I'd also like to really request that we stick with the 1,000 feet. I understand other towns have gone with 500. I think those are also more densely populated towns, and so you can't spit without hitting a resident, you know? So 500 feet severely limits them. I don't think it limits it as much in a town like Littleton. And I don't see why in such a small town we would need more than 5 spots for them to be. A lot of my comments are going to be very similar to the last meeting because I don't think any of what we talked about from the last meeting has been incorporated into this. So one of my concerns is, it says that a security plan will be provided to the police department. It doesn't really tell what that security plan should be. I just feel like leaving it up to the police department or the police chief to say, oh yeah, that looks good, isn't enough. I feel like we really need some language in there about what we expect the security to be, and Giffords has some sample language on that. I did email it to you. Also, my question is about liability insurance. Giffords also has that in their sample law. I'm wondering if we can include that. Someone else who can't be here tonight left some questions for me too. So Bobby Dressel, she said, there's no language in the new draft bylaw to address the sale of disassembled guns. It was brought up at the last planning board meeting. Is there a reason why that wasn't put in here? I think that's one of the things that most of us are concerned about, is this, what the Globe brought up, that you can go from one gun store and buy the components to a automatic weapon and then go to the next one and finish putting it together. And you have essentially a weapon that is illegal in our state. I hate the number, and the number is what I think got a lot of people's attention. But to me, that's the more dangerous part, right? Is not the number of actual licenses, but the ability to walk out of the mill with a semi-automatic assault rifle. And also, when will this be brought to town meeting? We were
it sounds like that it might be pushed off to the spring, and so, again, these are Bobby's words. I encourage that this would be scheduled within the next 30 days, if not scheduled it swiftly. Some of us may force a special meeting with a citizen's petition.
Can I stop right there for just for a sec? Because we've put this bylaw before us, we have a moratorium right now, correct?
Well, the zoning is, the zoning is effective from the date of our first publication. And our first publication was November...
It would have been 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. So this bylaw can be passed in 30 days, or it can be passed in the spring. The effective date in either case would be the first week in November.
Right,
So what happens if if someone comes in the meantime?
they can't do it.
So we just say, you can't do it yet?
So it's actually an interesting question. If someone comes, it's currently allowed here, right?
Right.
So if someone comes, it's allowed. If Springtown meeting were to adopt this bylaw, their use can become illegal and they would have to stop operating or get a special permit for a location.
So it's not the same as a moratorium?
It is the same as a moratorium, right?
Well,
So-
but you're saying that they could operate between now and the spring, right?
Correct.
Well, that's not the same as moratorium.
Then it's not.
Fair point, yep, okay, so you've got a,
So-
you've got a window. But it's still gonna go back in time, right? So the freeze is the freeze that's effective in November, because I guess I would add to that, the town votes the bylaw then goes to the Attorney General for approval, so there's a process. It doesn't become an operational bylaw until the Attorney General approves it and the town clerk posts it. That's when it becomes effective. When town meeting votes for it, I think you can deny someone the right.
Okay,
So all the more reason to do it sooner rather than.
thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Jeff Tully, Stony Stream. We talked about nursery schools moving into places next to gun stores, but what about if, let's say, the rock climbing place goes out of business at the point? Now, does that open up a sixth location for gun stores because it's now not within 1,000 feet?
Well, you have the cinema right next to it, too. So.
Right, but as an example, so
Right.
if something does go out of business, now there's another location that's open.
Potentially.
Yeah, so it's, right, so the sensitive receptors are active or non-existent. So when they're active, they function.
Okay.
If they're not, if they're not operating, then they're not functioning and they're not a receptor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. It's like I'm going to become a rock climber.
Support your local rock climbers. Anyone else, by the way? Yes, sir.
Rick Stahovic, Foster Street. I want to echo the desire to keep things at 1,000 feet. I think that's important, so I just want to publicly state that. And then I think as far as town meeting, we should do it as quickly as possible and not wait. I understand that there's a freeze, but the sooner we're clear with potential gun owners of coming to town of how we operate and what we expect of them, the better, because right now it's open-ended, and we left it to the chief of police, who clearly doesn't have our best interest for safety in mind by issuing 80 licenses in the town. So I would actually prefer that we move forward fast and get this bylaw voted on as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. So, just to clarify, we're not pushing 500 or 1,000. We just want to make sure that whatever we approve is viable. If it's 1,000 and it works and we have 6 units or 5 units, whatever the number is, and town council thinks it's defensible, we'll stay at 1,000 feet.
That's great.
That's all we're trying to do. All we're trying to make sure is that whatever we propose has a legitimate shot of passing the Attorney General. As far as scheduling further, we have a meeting on the 7th. We'll get the changes here. We'll deal with them on the 7th, and if it's up to the select board, if they want to have a special town meeting to address this, we'll have it done between us and town council as quickly as possible.
Okay, and if that's not something that's fast enough, can a moratorium be put in place to prevent licenses from being issued?
No.
There's no
Doesn't
more-
mean we have to approve them. I mean, we can say we have a bylaw in the middle and do nothing about it and then let them take us to court. By the time they're done with court, the bylaw will have been done, so it's however you want to look at it. But we will try to get it done as quickly as possible, and then it's up to the select board and to decide if they want to have a special town meeting for this.
Okay, and can the townspeople push for a meeting faster if the select board doesn't want to move fast enough?
I think they're probably going to hear you.
If you bring a citizen petition to the town clerk, there will be a special town meeting.
Okay, good to know.
Thank you. So we're going to continue this till the 7th,
Yeah,
correct?
Wednesday, December 7th.
Do you think you'll have most everything squared away for us for that meeting? We'll work on the map, we'll get that squared away for you, the 1,000 to 500 feet.
Yeah, I think the work we have to do is not a problem at all.
Okay.
By then.
So we should be good for
I
the
think
7th.
it's, again, kind of to revisit and conclude, it's drilling down and making sure that there's real opportunities that we can defend.
Okay. Did you have a
Mr. Chair, I
question?
have one final question for town council. It's what Ms. Pagorni brought up, why disassembled guns were left in. I guess it's more, why aren't they listed here? I mean, if you could just answer that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm very good at zoning. The laws on gun sales is not my area, so I need to study that. But what I can tell you is I believe that the state doesn't regulate the sale of those. Other states do, our state does not. And I'll get you chapter and verse on that. We talked with Allison about this, and this was her advice. But you want an answer, you'll get an answer. I'll get you more information on that.
Thank you very much. And from my perspective, if town council could please take a look at the liability insurance question and the security plan details.
So as far as the security, why don't we put it out that it's, as part of the special permit granting authority, we can ask for outside peer review for security. Would that make it more palatable, since we do peer reviews
That's kind of
anyway?
where I was going to, but yeah, we want to do a little more research on it and see what's available to us in Massachusetts.
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's almost starting to sound like we could have a bylaw in place, but then we could also have regulations, planning board regulations, and how to make that bylaw work. So some of those issues might go in the.
Might be better in a set of regulations.
In a set of regulation for us. Okay. Great.
And before you vote to continue the hearing, if we start the Wednesday, December 7th meeting at 6 o'clock, we could do this continued public hearing for the firearms business at 6:45. That works for you?
6 o'clock, good with everyone?
On December 7th?
Yeah.
Yeah, Wednesday, December 7th.
That's good, thank you.
Cindy, you had a question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to request, once this process is complete, as far as the bylaw, drafting of the bylaw, can you just write a letter to the select board requesting our consideration of a special town meeting?
Sure.
I just want to avoid a citizen's petition being circulated, and we've had problems in the past with that whole process. And I would just like the select board to be able to, I think it would be an easier process if you just submitted a letter to us asking us to consider it and then have it go forward that
That would
way,
be perfect.
as opposed to all the work that goes into a citizen's petition. And I just wanted to ask town council too, if you could just reiterate the process. If we did have a special town meeting and this bylaw was to pass, it needs to go to the Attorney General for approval.
Right.
And what happens in between that timeframe, between it passing the
Right.
town level and Attorney General approval?
Right, so let's go back to the date of publication, right? So the date of publication is the first week in November. That's the day we notified the world that we were going to consider this zoning amendment. So that is if passed and approved, that is the effective date. So that anyone coming in between that date and after is subject to that bylaw. So you've got the period between the publication and town meeting. So now town meeting acts on it, right? So if town meeting were to vote it down and someone were to locate before then, that business could go on. If town meeting approved it and someone located, the bylaw still has to go to the Attorney General, but they could continue operating until the attorney, right? So they can continue operating until the Attorney General acts on it, right? So there's a window in there, but it's the commercial risk they take of starting a business that they may lose in 90 days or 120 days.
And also, we can decide not to act on it, right? And then they want to sue the town for not giving them a license, that's up to them. But if we have a bylaw that we're working on, it's,
What you said.
Yeah, let them take us to court, okay? That's what God made lawyers for. All right, so December 7th, we're going to start at 6 o'clock. And we heard you loud and clear. We will, once we're done, we will send it over, a request for a special town meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, we have an 8:30 continued public hearing, 410 Great Road, Master Plan, Development Aquifer, Water for East Coast District, Sidewalk Curb Cut, Special Permit, Residents at King Street Commons.
Should I give a minute or good?
What?
Should I give it a minute or we're good?
We're good.
Good.
Just give them a second to get everybody out. Okay. All right, go ahead.
I haven't seen Limitless yet.
Do you want to read the notice?
Santa Claus, we're getting there.
I'm getting to the site plan here.
It's Netflix.
Now I gotta get to the notice. Shall we watch TV for a while?
Any preferred programs?
Tom, thank you.
I'd like Disney, please.
Tom, thank you. Thank you.
Dim the lights and bring on the popcorn.
I know.
I'll have to get to the notice.
All right.
I can start talking, but yeah, I have a preamble anyway. Good evening. My name is Rick Freiberg from TEC, the civil engineer for the project at 410 Great Road. So we were last in front of the planning board about a month or so ago to have an informal discussion about the project, and now obviously we've since submitted our special permit applications for the site, which were read during the public notice reading. The site, as you know, called the Mill in town. It's one of the gateways into the downtown of Littleton. It's a first impression, I think, that a lot of people have when they come to visit Littleton and are coming off of 495. It's about 4 acres in size in total, and it is previously fully developed, as you know, with buildings that have been sort of built out over the years. I think in a total of about 9 different additions over the years. The building has been expanded and developed with broken up pavement and slash kind of gravelly areas out back, but it's essentially 100% previously developed. We have had a lot of discussions about this, both with the planning board and also with historic. So we've been to both boards to talk a little bit about the building and understand sort of the town's perspective on the site. We always try to do that. As we talked about with the 550 King Street project, we want to understand, sort of the town's perspective on a piece of property before we seriously consider pursuing it for reinvestment. And some of the things that we've learned through our own due diligence, but also through the discussions we've had with the board and historic, was really our first test was to understand the existing building that's there.
what kind of condition is it in? What are the floor-to-floor challenges? Are there dimensional issues with reinvestment in the building? Are there code issues with investing in the building? So during our due diligence, we've had an opportunity to do an environmental survey to study what's in the building in terms of materials that could be harmful during demolition and the like, or in terms of renovation. We've also had a chance to initiate a topographic and utility survey on the site, so we have a much better understanding of the existing conditions and how the topography plays at the site. And of course, we've had a chance to walk around the building and observe the dimensional challenge and also the conditional challenges of the building. I think I'm probably not overstating it when I say that the building is in need of significant reinvestment. The property is in need of significant reinvestment. And the result of our further due diligence since the last time we spoke is that our initial impression was right. The building has hazardous materials in it that need to be remediated. The condition is poor. The structure of the building is poor. And the code compliance that it would take to upgrade the building to be fully code compliant is substantial. So with that in mind, we continue to propose that we raise the existing building as part of the project. We've also had a chance to run a financial model and talk to various lenders about the project to understand how we can make this project viable. So we're going into it knowing that there's an existing building that needs some cleanup, environmental cleanup work associated with it, needs to be raised and site prepped. And so what we do is we talk to the lenders to understand, what is the value of a permitted unit? And then that helps us understand, okay, how many units do we need to be able to acquire the property, raise the building, do the remediation work that's necessary, and carry the costs basically associated with that loan until we can get to the point of construction. So we've gone through that exercise, and that helped us inform us as we put together the conceptual plan, which is now on the screen. So the conceptual plan had a number of goals. I talked a lot about the condition of the building, the existing building that's there, and how I personally don't see many redeeming qualities with the building itself. But through our investigation and due diligence, we have found quite a bit of history in the building as it relates to the prior tenants of the building, the historic uses of the property. And so what we wanted to do as part of the redevelopment, rather than celebrate necessarily the building itself, celebrate those uses that have occurred on the property in the past with the United Elastic. Right, they were a significant employer here in Littleton, and so one of the ideas that we have as you look at the concept plan and one of the goals of the project to celebrate that history. In the bottom left corner of the plan, you see it's kind of like a brown dashed area. But what that is, that's a pocket park where we see an opportunity to do some monumentation out there with plaques and maybe even relic from inside the building that we can use to tell the story of what happened on that site, the various uses that were there, and how important it was to Littleton's history as an employer of people. Again, not to celebrate the building too much, but we do want to celebrate that history. This was a very productive site for the town of Littleton, and it should be celebrated, we feel. We also see opportunities, and we've done this in other historic buildings around the state, and namely in Lawrence and Lowell and in Haverhill. But we find opportunities with the decor and the lobby areas in particular, where we can again continue to tell those stories of what occurred on the site, old photographs, plaques that describe the different uses on the property, and make it so it's integral to the building in a way that is attractive, but also helps to tell that story over time. We also believe that reinvestment like this into the property means this is a significant reinvestment into the property. It means the property is going to be viable and serve as a community asset for many years to come, as opposed to what I'll call sort of like a Band-Aid approach of trying to work with the existing building and maybe we'll buy 10 years, but maybe we'll have to figure out something beyond that. So this building that you see here, another one of the goals of the project was to keep the building as far away as we could from the surrounding residences. So you'll see the building is pushed right up to Great Road, like the existing building is today. Basically, the building is almost in the same footprint as the building that's there today, with the exception of the finger that extends behind the lumber yard off to the right. We wanted to more or less square up the driveways. So directly on the bottom of the page is the future of 550 King Street. So we want to make sure that the driveways line up for traffic safety. We also thought that this property proposed a unique opportunity to connect to the downtown in two ways. One is on Great Road, but then also on King Street, because the project has frontage there. So we'd have sidewalks and also driveways that allow for efficient dispersal of traffic. They get to avoid the intersection, lighten the load there, and also provide these really nice pedestrian connections that are landscaped and you'll see the plan littered with trees. But we also wanted to provide quite a bit of green space on site. We think that if this is going to be a residential property, then it should be landscaped like one and not like a commercial parking lot. And so when you look at the plan, you'll see sidewalks all around, green space, none of which really exists today with the property as it's been developed. There's also, the building is sort of a donut shape. There's room for interior courtyard amenities for residents, so they'll look over a nice green common area in the center that's also really private. And that private area that's outdoors would connect to interior sort of amenity spaces like a gym, community room, that kind of thing, even to the lobby again, where the history of the building could be sort of further celebrated. We also looked at, obviously it's important to provide the amount of parking. You probably look at the plan and say, I don't see enough parking for the number of units that we're talking about on the site. And that's because we took advantage of the topography. Like I said, we've had an opportunity to study that more and get an initial topographic survey done. So underneath the building is actually a full layer of totally hidden parking from Great Road. And under the building itself is opportunity to provide 200 parking spaces. What that does for us on the site plan is allows us to propose the parking in a fashion that's orderly, but also allows room for greenscape and sidewalks as well. And I think, maintain a very attractive exterior appearance while tucking a lot of that parking sort of out of view of the public underneath the building. And the parking ratio for it is 1.25 per unit, which matches the village, the VC zoning district requirements. So what we've filed with the planning board is for special permit approvals, but we also are hopeful that you'll consider a condition that we return to the planning board with full site plan review, which will include architectural plans, landscaping plans, lighting plans, the exact location of all the parking spaces and the like, and stormwater is another one that we understand will be reviewed. But if the board is supportive, what this allows us to do is to move forward with securing the financing to acquire the property and to begin our sort of remediation of the property in the meantime as we're working in the background to prepare all the necessary details that you all would want to see before you allowed us to proceed with the construction of a new building. But again, your support, what that would mean to us is the opportunity to reinvest in a property that seriously needs it. Again, this is a front door to the town of Littleton. It's the first property a lot of people are going to see when they come off of the highway. We think there's an opportunity to do it in a really attractive way and also provide a use on the property that's much more in keeping with the town's vision for Littleton Common than what's there today. Thank you for your time. I look forward to answering any questions.
I'll start. Is this a conceptual of what you want to build or what you need to show for finance? Or because we've talked across the street about assisted living, independent living, senior, all kinds of different things. Are those on the table for this property, or is it just?
Yeah, we're considering all kinds. Really the most important thing that this is for us, we wanted to prove that we could provide a plan that was viable economically. And for us, what that means at this stage of the game, because we don't own the property yet, we need to provide the lenders with something that's financeable so that we can move forward with the acquisition, the remediation work, the demolition of the building, and the site prep that's required to get it to a point where it's sort of developable. And so that's what this conceptual plan represents. I do think there are aspects of this plan that will remain. Again, I think locating the building closer to 119 is important. I think the monumentation in the park is important. But could there be a slightly different configuration of the building as we provide our future site plan review? That's entirely possible. As it relates to the type of housing that's proposed, I think all the above is on the table. We've had conversations with multiple different type of residential people with interest, age in place, market rate, workforce housing. We're talking to them all. And what's important for us to understand, and time will allow us to do this from now until the part where we arrive at you back in front of you with a site plan review, is to make sure we fully understand how this integrates with the housing at 550 King Street and how we make sure we do this thing the right way so that it maximizes, because there's a huge potential here for Littleton between 550 King Street and this site. And it's important for us to do it in the right way that can maximize its value for the town of Littleton. If we miss by a little bit, you're missing out on a little bit of a big opportunity, and we want to make sure we hit a home run.
So this is more or less a best case, worst case scenario, so that
This allows, if the board were to approve a plan like this as a master plan, knowing that we need to come back and provide all the details, this allows us to secure the financing, to close on the property and begin our remediation work.
Any questions?
Thank you so much for coming back with us on this. My one question is, what was the final disposition from the Historical Commission?
Yeah, so we haven't filed a formal application, so they get involved, as you might know, they get involved when we file for a demolition permit on the building. We haven't filed one yet. Obviously, we don't own the property yet, but we wanted to talk to them informally and just understand their perspective on the property. My takeaway from the meeting with Historic is that they also didn't see much redeeming value in the building itself. They were interested in the history of the users of the property, but I think looking back through I have the MACRS filing, but looking back through the MACRS filing, I think there was 9 or 10 building additions over the years, and it's been sort of underinvested in over the years to a point where the building is so degraded. I don't think there's much value, and they did not really force our hand. What their ability to do is, if they felt very strongly about it, which I didn't get the impression that they do, they could impose what they call a demolition delay ordinance. So at their discretion, they could delay the demolition of the building upon receipt of a demo permit for 1 year. So we had a brief discussion about what that would mean for the project, and the truth of it is probably it doesn't mean a lot, because by the time we remediate and do all the things we have to do before we would ever get to a point where we raise the building, closing the property, et cetera, probably a year or so will pass. I think their end disposition, in my opinion, I mean, I don't think they're here tonight, and we will have to go back in front of them at the time when we file a demo permit, was that they didn't see much value in the building itself, but they did agree with the value of the historic users of the property, and so we wanted to find a way to celebrate that together.
So when I was there at the meeting, that's pretty much, they agreed to a 1-year moratorium on it. Vic was there, he said that's not a problem.
Okay.
We talked about maybe trying to keep the cupola or something as
Yeah,
a
I think-
design criteria.
Yeah, I think, so yeah, we didn't talk, I didn't run through a lot of the architecture because I want to show you what the full plans will look like when we come back for site plan review, but we intend to use the form-based code and the intent and spirit of the form-based code as it relates to the building facade, the undulation of the frontage, make sure that this building looks appropriate for the area, and part of that task, I think, will be talking to various people, probably even coming back in front of you one more time informally to talk about architecture before we make a final filing, but if it makes sense to sort of replicate the cupola, if that's sort of decided to be sort of a town landmark, we want to listen and we want to incorporate what you guys want to see. Like I said, we think this is an opportunity for a home run here, and if we do it right, with the right collaboration, we think we'll be successful, and we think the town will be successful, so we want to take every opportunity that we can to make it that way.
Okay, great. I just had one other comment more than anything else. So on the original hearing notice, it talks about the application being for a master plan development special permit under section 173-89. I think it's actually 8.8 because 8.9 is only for 25 acres or more. So I just wanted to make sure that when you come back for the site review that it's following 8.8, not 8.9. Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Barlow, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just, could you talk a little bit about the area of the building that's closest to Great Road that's a different color?
Sure, yes.
Is that part of the old building, or is that just a different use, or what is it?
So the building that's proposed is actually set back further from the street than the existing building. We're trying to accomplish a few things. One is we want to make sure it has a really attractive streetscape. So what we wanted to do is provide room for a sidewalk and also some green space up against the building. Again, kind of consistent. That's a requirement, as you know, I'm sure, in form-based code. They have these green space areas between the street and the building. So we wanted to make sure we complied with that. Also gave us the opportunity, if we wanted to put outdoor seating or something like that to liven up the area, activate the street, that would give us room to do so. But the lighter shade, so the building is physically set back further than the existing one. What we wanted to do with the lighter shade is actually 4 stories high. The darker red part is 6 stories high. And the reason is we were trying to, in the areas that are closer to the street, sort of downscale the building a little bit. But it also provides a really neat opportunity for sort of a rooftop terrace. On the roof of that 4th floor, you'll be able to walk out, so you'll be on the 5th floor of the darker red area, walk out onto the roof of the 4th floor. And the way it lines up, you'll almost be able to look right down what's going to be the new boulevard for 550 King Street and oversee the green, all the activity that's going to be there. It lays out really wonderfully in terms of that opportunity, and it provides a sort of, downscale at the streets so the building doesn't
Right.
feel quite as tall.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? No? Lisa?
No, I like it. I really like the pocket park. I'm assuming that you will be looking at traffic calming on Great Road and 119, and so I know that's down the road. So
Yeah, we
no,
I'll let you know, at a cursory level, we have much more studying to do when we come back on that. But at a cursory level, we looked at a couple things that are challenging. The existing traffic pattern, it uses that driveway. It's very faint, but kind of across from the ramps is how you get in there today. And I don't know if you guys have ever tried to go out that driveway before, but it is not easy. Not easy to do. It's in a difficult location, and because of where it is and how it engages with the ramps, it's too dangerous for what we're trying to propose here. So for us, it made sense to locate the driveways lined up directly with the 550 King Street driveway on Great Road, and then also have the King Street driveway pop through next to the gas station that's there. I think it's the Shell. I think it's the Shell station, yeah. And use those for our access. We've greened off, as you can see, that other access point to make sure that our people aren't coming or going that way, to minimize the traffic impact at that very difficult driveway. So those are things we've looked at ahead of time. But yeah, the full study of it will come with the site plan review.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else?
I'm not really very familiar with the topography there, but it does slope down away from King Street down towards the lumber. And I was wondering if you could manipulate it so that you could get two levels of parking in there, have one enter at the top on the left and the other lower on the right.
I think that's a real consideration. Yeah. So there's sort of three pinch points that we encounter. One is obviously where we want our driveway to be on Great Road, right? Because the road is what the road is, and we want to be able to tie into it, so we can't really change the grade there. So we come from there, and we want to be relatively steady.
Yeah.
Because I think you want the entry point. You don't want to dive down like
Right.
it is actually on one of the driveways to the right. You kind of dive down quick. It's just not a comfortable entrance. So we have that pinch point. We have the pinch point, or constraint, I should say, where it ties back up with King Street. So we're watching from there. That actually will be a fairly
That's
steep
quite a
road
grade
down.
change.
There's about 15 feet of topography to make up there. So that actually, and that's why there's no parking. That's more like a ramp
Yeah.
to get up. And we think it'll be not very well utilized, but we do want to provide the opportunity for people if they're headed, that way on 110,
Right.
they don't have to go to the light, and exacerbate issues there. And then of course where our site meets the lumberyard site. So I think if we study that a little closer, we might find out that maybe two levels is possible. But right now we know that the plan works at this size with just the one level of podium parking. If we could figure it out with two, there might be an opportunity to increase green space on site, maybe fewer outside spaces and the like. But we feel this plan actually has a considerable amount of green space, certainly much more than there today. But that's something we'll certainly investigate as we got an initial topographic survey. The full one's supposed to come back, I think, in like December. So we'll study that closer.
Okay, anyone else?
I'm just curious if you're anticipating or expecting any commercial inside, or is it 100% residential?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about at the informal meeting was that we wanted to propose this property to be 100% residential. And the reason was, so we're doing a lot of retail at 550 King Street, right across the street. And retail is most successful when it's clustered together. There's sort of a critical mass that you need to create the place that we want to create, the vibrancy that we want to create at the new green space that's going to be part of the 550 King Street Common. What we didn't want to do is parcel off a chunk of retail and having people walk in a quarter of a mile crossing Great Road and the like to use it. So for us, it made sense to keep this property entirely as residential, and then continue to focus on making that retail environment on 550 King Street very vibrant.
We had talked about it almost being a phasing of what you're doing over there, like the fifth phase of 4 phases over there and the 5th phase or something like that. And we also talked about the informal discussion about other options, age in place, senior housing, all kinds of. It's hopefully gives them time to figure out exactly what you want to do, what can be done.
Yeah, our crunch, like I'm trying to elaborate as best I can without saying more than I'm supposed to, but our crunch is really related to financing to closing the property.
Right.
Once we get there, we have time to breathe a little bit and figure out our total plans so that we make sure everything works the way that it should work. and we make sure that we're maximizing this opportunity for the town.
Yeah, I'll say, just a lot of time, Sure. Okay, sure. Brian Tarbrooks, Fletcher Lane. Just because my kid has gone to Kelly's music school, I spent a ton of time there. I think this is a great plan. I will say, the pinch point of trying to turn left into that driveway off Great Road, take your life in your hand. Most of the time, I'll go around the other way and come back. So that's good luck to you on that. But I think this is a fabulous plan. I do hope there's room across the street for places like Kelly's, because they really are an institution here in town. But this is fabulous. I'm so thrilled to see this happen.
Thank you.
I was going to say, turning left into that from 119 is a problem because you're so close to the light.
Right.
You end up blocking traffic. And that's a terrible, terrible parking lot, right?
Yeah, so right now, actually, you can almost kind of see it. So the building on the corner, right? And then you've got the very left side of where the brown area is in the bottom left of the plan. That existing driveway is like right there.
Yeah.
So we tried to pull it away further. I think you're probably right, though. In the end, we'll probably wind up restricting some of the movements in there. And the truth is, if people are on, if they're already on 110, maybe it's easy to just go straight and go on after the gas station, right? And so that this allows that. Yeah, to get in there.
Instead of turning left.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's impossible to turn left.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Can you, yeah, I know.
Megan Rank. I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the effort that is going into telling the history of the building. I think that's really important, especially as somebody who didn't grow up here. I never knew that about the elastic. I think sometimes learning the history is a lot more important than an object. So thank you for that. I really look forward to seeing what happens with the IBM building and this, because I've never felt that the common is indicative of what our community is. It's just, the whole area is just an eyesore. So I appreciate the time that you're putting into making sure that this is going to look nice. And then from a housing perspective, I think this is where we put houses. We put them in we repurpose existing space. It's near a highway. And we offer more chances for people to live here than just $1 million homes built on farmland. So I urge you to support this. I think it's a great idea, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Erica Pudgorny. I also love this idea, and I just want to say I hope that you support it. At the last meeting when someone suggested saving the tower, I've lived here for 23 years. I actually had to drive by the mill to see the tower that he was talking about. I didn't even know it was there. So it's not a building that many of us look at and go, oh, that's Littleton, It really doesn't have that history for us. And so I don't want to see this put in jeopardy to try to save something that really doesn't mean that much to us. I like the idea of, something that tells the story of that property, but I don't think that building is worth saving. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? The cupola, the Sitco cupola, I call it. Anyway. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, considering this as an extension of the 550 project, there's a great need for family housing in this town. And to my understanding, there aren't any 3-bedroom units in the 550 King Street. So I'm wondering if you could rearrange something somehow so that we get a substantial number of family units.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bartlett. I should have mentioned this because one of the permits involves inclusionary housing, the bylaw as well. So 550 King Street actually has 10% of three-bedroom units in it.
I didn't know that.
Because we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive for, not only, single working people, but also accommodating smaller families and the like. That'll be the same for this project as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this may be not, I think it's an okay place for kids. I don't know. I mean, I'll let you figure that out.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think once we get through this period, we're in a crunch right now.
Yeah.
Once we get through this period, we'll have an opportunity to really pull back and think about this and make sure that we lay this all out the right way. That's going to be an important part of figuring out how to make this the best that it can be. And we need a little time to study that more.
Okay.
But our intention is to provide a mix of units consistent with what we had done at 550 King Street, and even, as Mark alluded to, considering maybe other buckets of housing that maybe aren't addressed in the 550 King Street project. We're listening on all those options.
Thanks.
So that leaves us with what to do. We have a plan before us that is essentially a financial plan to make sure that whatever they're proposing is viable. We know going down the pike that it's going to be a bunch of other things, and you have to come before us for everything else, just like you have to do. So I'm kind of looking at it as an extension of what you've got over at 550 King Street. I think you're asking us for some sort of affirmation of what we're looking at so that you can go to the banks and say, great, give us the money. We at the very least, this is our backstop. We can do this. We'd like to do something better than this, or something else, but at least gives us the ability to get going with the process.
That's right, yeah, and essentially what that would be a special plan decision from the planning board, even with all the conditions that we have for 550 King Street that we come back for. I mean, we could almost probably copy the conditions from 550 King Street with a few exceptions and modifications to it as relates to phasing and the like, but that we need to return for full site plans, full architectural elevations, stormwater, landscaping plan, lighting plan, all the things that we're required to do over there. We expect that you'll require us to do that here as well, and we look forward to doing that together.
So can we conditionally approve it? How do you? I don't see a problem with it.
I'd approve it.
Yeah, I would approve it.
Anna, with all the conditions they've got to come back with anyway. At least give them. I know you're.
Well, I would say I'd give it a thumbs up in terms of everything I've heard today. But yeah, as long as everything comes back.
Yeah.
Oh, it has to, yeah, and my thought would be, just like 550 King Street, it's really the same way. We can't build anything at 550 without coming back to, we come back phase by phase, and I think we would look to mirror those sort of conditions here to give you guys another look at it, obviously, before we apply for building permits or something like that.
Yes, that would be good.
Okay, so we should probably take a vote on what we have in front of us to send them on their way.
Sure. And
Yeah.
then finalize that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, everybody good with that? So I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And I'll entertain a motion to approve the conceptual plan that's before us with the conditions all the conditions that are at 550 King Street that we'll have a chance to look at on the 1st, 7th, when you want to get everything ready for that, we can vote it then.
You would need, let's see, Anna's not available for the 1st, so this should be on the 7th.
Well, could we vote it subject to the conditions? You want to do it that way, or you want the conditions in front of us? It's going to be all the conditions we approved at 550.
I still want to see you, Mark.
I know, and I knew I had like 2 chances, slim and none of that one.
Well, hold on just a second. So, let me look here. So on the 1st, if we did this at 6 p.m., then I could go to my other meeting.
Can we do it on the 1st at 6 p.m.?
Yeah, I can just push the bicycle and pedestrian master plan discussion till after.
So we're going to do
this.
it via Zoom then?
Zoom,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll do it via Zoom. Okay.
That's perfect. Okay.
Okay, sounds good to me. Where was I? No, I'm not asking for a vote. We closed it. We're going to vote the conditions on the 1st.
Thursday, December 1st.
Okay, perfect.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Thank
Yep,
you.
Thanks, have a good night.
I have
Thank
one
you.
more comment real quick. I would just like to say thank you very much for, I guess I would say, authentically trying to utilize the core base code that the town has created. So thank you.
We'll make you happy, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Very, very nice. Very nice project. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'll make the motion that we adjourn. We've done everything we could possibly do.
Yeah.
Without snacks.
I second it.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. This was a long night and we got a lot of stuff done. Thank you.